It being 6:30, we're going to call this meeting of the Chelmsford Planning Board to order. First up is public input, which I'm going to waive the reading of the guidelines for that, but if anyone would like to speak, if you come up and say your name and address.
I'm generally polite and defer to others, but don't see any others. I'm Kelly Beatty. I live at 117 Park Road, and this time last night I was just getting back from Texas to see the eclipse. I hope you got to see it here. It's hard to believe, but in 2000, the planning board, driven by Bob Morse, and I worked together to create the first outdoor lighting bylaw for the town. And at the time, it was one of the few towns in the state that had one. Now more than 50 towns have a bylaw. Ours was updated in 2013, but basically what we have technology has run forward. We never envisioned LEDs and the pervasiveness of that. So I've had a couple of conversations with Evan, and I'm prepared to bring forward. I realize you're preoccupied with Springtown meeting, and I don't mean to get in the way of that. But afterward, I'm prepared to bring forward to you the possibility of a new version of that bylaw that updates a lot of the technology. I've worked with a lighting professional to create, and also with Evan, and layering on what we have to update it. And so my biggest reason for coming to you here tonight is that I'm actually a little conflicted as to whether this would continue to be a zoning bylaw as the current one is, or to become a general bylaw. And my reason for exploring that would be that I would like to explore the idea of creating a sunset clause for non-conforming fixtures. So that, say, within a period of, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, that we can imagine all of the lighting in the town to be of a certain, following certain prescriptions and guidelines. And so I know you're preoccupied with town meeting. I don't mean to pass out anything now, but if you're willing to entertain this notion of should this be general versus zoning, I'd love to hear it. One of the things, for example, that is in the old bylaw is a lot of discussion about sign lighting. And the planning board adopted a new sign, outdoor illuminated signs as a separate issue. Mike, you remember we worked on that. And so this new version doesn't say anything about signs because that's being taken care of elsewhere. I'm trying to keep the lines of clean. So that's basically it. The new version would be a little bit more comprehensive. It would talk about things. Not only the original version basically said lighting needs to be pointed down, and since that time, we've had with the introduction of LED lighting, it's a complaint-driven bylaw as it stands, and I could have brought forward to the building inspector hundreds of different installations that don't meet that basic standard. So anyway, that's my purpose for being here tonight. It's just sort of a heads up. I would love to find out, if possible to discuss tonight, what your thoughts on zoning versus general. If it were a general bylaw, does it really even come under the planning board? I don't know these things, but I'm eager to work with you and maybe bring something forward at fall town meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in public input? Then, there seeing none, we'll advance forward to administrative review. We have an A&R for creation of a parking lot for 15 to 21 and number 20 Dunstable Road, and for 17 to 19 Groton Road.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Hushman Dafshar from Taj Engineering here in town. By virtue of this A&R, the applicant who owns the property located at 1719 Groton Road, and the property located at number 20, which is this property, and that property, and that property across the street. As you can see on the plan, which was submitted on the proposed A&R plan, the number 22 Dunstable Road and number 1521 Dunstable Road across the street, they do not have enough parking, although they have several offices in those buildings. So the applicant is proposing to subdivide his property located at 1719 Groton Road and create the two contiguous lots as shown on the plan, lot 1A and 1B, by virtue of which 1B will be used for parking for these two other buildings. Lot B can accommodate 15 standard parking spaces. It could be more, but the northeasterly end of the new created lot 1B is taken by a 20-foot access easement, which will provide access for the owner's applicant's vehicle to maneuver and park as two existing parking spaces to the northerly or northwesterly corner of number 22 Dunstable Road, which are these two spaces here, which is currently being used. Having that said, we request your approval.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts for the applicant? Okay.
I can go first. Just out of curiosity, why do we need to subdivide this? Why not just allow the other properties to use the parking?
Well, it's a good question, actually. The applicant wants to make sure that once he has flown to the better places, other kingdoms, the trust, the signs and the ears, there will not be any issues or problems, and anyone wants to sell any of these properties, they will have their own parking spaces.
Okay. Looking at the plans on the top section, it looks like there are two spaces that are marked on the lawn. Is that going to be eventually paved?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There will be a short retaining wall. There is a little grade there. There will be a very short decorative retaining wall there, most likely Allen blocks. Nice looking wall, and it will be paved, and the topography will match the rest of the.
Okay.
Parking.
So after the subdivision, there's going to be a project to repave and reline everything?
That's correct.
This is all getting redone, right? So cool.
That's all the questions I have, but I do have a concern. Our zoning requires buffer between parking and the lot lines. And it looks like by subdividing it, we're going to eliminate that buffer and make it non-conforming. I know that's not
Yeah.
in our
Yeah, it's
purview
not-
under the A&R, but I'm a little concerned that by approving this, we make it non-conforming. It also requires planting between the parking and the lot line.
Those buildings are non-conforming anyways, right now.
No, I know, but the
The whole
parking,
area is non-conforming.
but the
I don't
parking is
think there's any way
conforming.
to make this area completely conforming,
But the
correct?
parking is conforming to our
The way it is right
standards,
now.
the way it is right now. If we subdivide it, it's no longer conforming, so we're making the situation even worse.
You understand that the parking is already there.
Yeah. But with the lot as one lot, you've got all of that lawn area as a buffer between the parking and the lot line.
There's a hill.
By subdividing it, you're putting the lot line right at the parking and completely removing the buffer, thus making it non-conforming.
I'm sorry, sir, I don't follow your question. Which buffer are you referring to?
So so if you look from where you drive into the parking, between where the front of the car would be and the far lot line, that currently is the buffer between the parking and the lot line. If you subdivide it, you're now putting the lot line right at the parking.
I'm sorry, I have to, so I can understand. I really don't understand it. And also, the endorsement of this plan by planning board should not be construed to be a determination of conformance with the zoning regulations. And also, we did talk to the Mr. Blansky down planner before. The requirement between the edge of the parking and the lot line is about 3 feet, which we are observing that. Now, going back to your question, do you mind to repeat, please?
So the buffer between the lot line and the parking, it's my understanding if it's over 15 spaces, it needs to be 15 feet. And so.
Oh, you mean this here?
Yep, from those, if you go up a little bit more, right around where you have yeah, let me get up and show you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right here. So this is the buffer right now. If you subdivide it, that's the buffer.
But this is an existing parking lot.
Yes.
Yep.
It's an existing parking lot with an existing buffer that conforms to our zoning. By moving a property line right at the parking, it is no longer conforming to our zoning. And I know that we don't have that as in our control in the A&R, but it is something that I feel we should condition as part of the A&R
I don't,
to be addressed in the future.
So it's a good point. They are essentially creating self-imposed hardships by creating new nonconformities. So under A&R, as you said, if it complies with the A&R standards, you're obligated to endorse. The safety valve is the disclaimer that the board's making no determinations as to zoning. But you're absolutely right. They are creating self-imposed hardships, and they are creating new nonconformities.
But I would like to make it a little bit, that disclaimer a little bit more specific.
So you can certainly, the minutes will notate that.
Yeah.
You can mention in your motion.
Mhm.
It happens more often than you would think, particularly for existing built neighborhoods.
That's all I have.
Anyone else? I'll take a motion.
I move that we endorse the A&R with the caveat that the planning board endorsement under the subdivision control law should not be construed as either an endorsement or an approval of zoning, parking setback, and planting requirements.
I'll second that.
That's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
I'll have the A&R signed tonight. You can pick it up tomorrow morning.
Next up, we have the 41 Central Square, which I will recuse for, as I'm in a butter.
Do you want me to read this paragraph, or we don't need to because we've already read it?
Well, I'm recused.
No, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably appropriate.
yep. 41 Central Square Oddfellows Project LLC request for a special permit for a reduction in parking to a previously approved special permit. This project requires a special permit per section 195-18, off-street parking and loading, for an additional reduction of 12 parking spaces to accommodate an additional 30 seats within a restaurant. The site is located in the CV Center Village District and is shown as parcel ID map 84, block 334, lot 11. It consists of approximately 30,040 square feet.
Thank you. Before we get into the details, we received most of these documents on Monday. I would just like to get a feel from the board if people have had enough time to go through them, or if people need more time. Thoughts?
I saw the site plan. Yeah, the piece with the different layouts and the pictures.
There were a lot of other
What
documents.
other documents were there?
The parking agreements, comments from the DPW,
All these, yeah, in yellow.
valet proposal, Rudy's agreement.
They're pretty quick reads,
I went through them all
like Rudy's
today.
agreement. Did you see that?
Okay.
Rudy's
I reviewed the
All right,
documents.
so if people are comfortable, we can continue.
Post-buy stuff.
Okay.
There's a valet agreement.
Okay. All right.
Want to bring up the layout sheet for me?
Valet.
All right. Good evening to the board. My name is Casey Ferrer with Howard Son Hudson on behalf of the applicant Oddfellows Project LLC. I do have Human and Ali with me as well, representing the actual restaurant. I do want to start off by saying the plans that I have prepared for tonight are largely in the spirit of the original approvals that were granted for Mylars dated April 7th of 2021 and revised through July 12th of 2021. It is my understanding that Human and Ali came in 2 meetings ago requesting this reduction or this further reduction, and one of the things that the board wanted to see was a site plan that kind of encompassed the current projections of where the project is going to go. So what I've done is I've put together a new site plan, if you will, that largely resembles what the original plan was, but makes slight tweaks that are, I guess, what we would consider the modifications for the project. So as was stated, the project internally is adding approximately 30 seats, which is where the parking reduction request is coming from. The seats would require an additional 12 spaces where we were already seeking a reduction. That reduction would now be expanded by the 12 spaces, or to a total of 42%. We did see a comment from the Chelmsford Police. The original approval included 2 ADA spaces. There is a Chelmsford specific bylaw that goes in excess of the state requirements of ADA. So in doing so with a parking lot between 40 and 50 spaces, we have added that extra ADA space so that we can now be in conformance with the town of Chelmsford ADA parking bylaws for specifically the property that the Oddfellows sits on, which is just those 48 parking spaces. It does not include the Santander. It does not include the former parking that was associated with where the Fisk House is now. And it does not include the town's 72 spaces behind us. So I do want to just point out on the plan, if I can, just kind of what the modifications are, and that'll help you visualize. So as I said, we had to add one more ADA parking space. So what that did was we had our original two right in these corner of spaces. We just shifted them down one so that we can have one space which has regular 5-foot access aisle, and then now we have two spaces which are van accessible. They have the 8 feet in between the two spaces. So now we have two van spaces with one typical ADA space. These all access the same curb cut that the previous approval used for access to the handicapped ramps, which goes directly, you go by these spaces, you're into the curb cut at the corner of the curb line, and then we've granted a new access path that goes directly towards the building, where they have changed their main entrance from our original understanding, which was gonna be the front. Now the main entrance that they're gonna utilize is gonna be through the side and on the patio. One of the ADA requirements that we do have to follow is that we have to have the closest reasonable path of access. So instead of making the accessible path go all the way around the corner to Central Square and then back to the patio, we've cut directly straight into where the patio is going and then lined it up with that entry along the side. So for the front, that is the extent of changes that we've proposed. One thing the applicants had me look at was where can we add parking so that maybe we don't have to request as much. So what I've done is there is a little bit of inefficiency in the striping behind the parking lot. I fixed and gained one space along those inefficiencies, which is right along the brook. And then also where there's right now just a swath of pavement that goes into the rear of the building, they currently use that for loading. I've maintained a loading area for them, but then striped off one space additionally in the back to gain 2 extra spaces from the original. In doing so, we had to modify the location of the dumpster just barely before we had anticipated moving the dumpster just beyond where it is now. Now I've had to rotate it to allow a car to be able to reverse out of this one head-in spot that's in the rear. In the same spirit of the original approval, whatever we've added in impervious, we have reduced in impervious to maintain a balance between the two. That basically maintains the project in redevelopment status, so no further stormwater design is required as far as the brook is concerned. As far as changes to the plan, I believe that encompasses everything that we're requesting a modification for. With that, I know that there has been significant documentation regarding operations and agreements submitted by the applicants. So if there are questions regarding that, I can certainly turn it over to the applicants, or if we want to talk about the site plan, I'm certainly here to answer any questions regarding the site plan and the modifications proposed therein.
Why don't we handle the site plan first, since Casey's up there? Does anyone have any questions on the site plan itself?
All right.
Okay. All right. So no site plan questions. Why don't we just open it up for general questions on the project or the agreements? Start with Mike.
I have no particular questions. I think they've addressed what we brought up at the last meeting.
Okay.
And, you know, it's a bit of an odd spot, and it'll never be perfect, but it seems pretty good.
Okay. John?
So in the parking lot, that's good news that we're able to gain 3 spots. And I trust with the valet service agreement that I saw there, that would also add, that would be used to have staff park off-site, or is that more for customers to want to use the restaurant?
I'll allow Human to address that question.
At the last meeting, it was brought up in the case that the valet service was required or needed, we'll be able to provide one. So we've done that. Additionally, there was a question about additional 30 seats require additional staff parking. So we made an off-site agreement with another entity that would provide that minimum of 4 spaces, depending on, it's a mechanic shop, so if they have more cars overnight, they will only allow 4. but if there aren't, we can use them all if they're available.
Was the valet for employees or for customers?
Valet was for customers, and the off-site was for employees.
Great, thank you.
Anita? Mike?
No, the only thing I want to add is I missed the last meeting, but I mulled in to watch it. But I was part of the committee that when this first came through, and that was a request at that time for valet. So it wasn't something new at last meeting. When this was proposed with the larger project, when the larger project got not voted down, and then this came forward, there was a discussion about parking all over the center of town, including the church across the street, and using that for valet
Correct.
at that time. So I just wanted to clarify. I thought it seemed like last meeting, but that was a new request by the planning board, and that was a request when we originally granted this 3 years ago. So I just wanted to clarify that. But I also think that we're not going to be able to solve this issue in the center of town, and I think they've made a very good effort to doing that right now.
If I may, Mr. Walsh, I do have the same company's email from 2 years ago
Yep.
at much lower price, but I submitted the most recent one.
Well, it's too bad we couldn't have done that. So,
Yeah, so I have that as well. You're correct.
thank you.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Joel?
No questions.
Okay. I have a few questions, specifically about the valet. While the valet service would be good, one question I have is where would they park the cars?
That would be part of their obligation to secure contract with off-site properties.
Okay, so it would be off-site, it wouldn't be
Correct.
in that
Correct.
location? Okay. You also mentioned that Santander has spaces available after 5 in your documentation. The signs on Santander actually don't indicate that they're open to the public after 5. It says that it's for Santander customers only. So it'd be good if you could work with them to adjust those signs, if we are using that as kind of a buffer. See if they might be willing to adjust those signs as part of this effort as well.
So I had a brief discussion with Human prior to this. I'd actually think that the town parking that's right behind us is sufficient enough to adequately take on the reduced parking that we're requesting. I asked him to actually take out the Santander section from that because there was, my understanding was there was an easement agreement originally when it originally got subdivided. That got changed when we lost 10 spaces. So I think their understanding was that they had access to that. I don't believe they do at this point. So I'd like to take out the Santander 10, but still maintain that with the parking reduction that we're requesting, there's significant parking that is behind us in the town lot, and then there's also parking across the street at the bike path with 30 public spaces, and the grist mill has 19 spaces dedicated to that retail plaza. So I do believe the area has sufficient parking without us requiring the use of the 10 Santander spaces.
Okay. And then,
I'm sorry, may I add?
Yeah.
In the monitoring of that area, pretty much every night, the cars park there at 8, 9 o'clock, and no one has ever been towed. And talking to a local branch manager is not going to really, accomplish what you're talking about in terms of any kind of agreement. But then I go back to what Casey said, as in terms of what really is needed, that wouldn't be essential to our proposal.
and then another question I had is, with the situation of parking, if people come into that area, it's not really clear what's public and what's not. Will you allow public parking in your spaces if you're also having your customers use the public?
100% accepted 8 assigned residential spaces that have
Correct.
signage on them. Because when the tenants come home, they want to make sure they have a spot.
But other than the residential?
Absolutely, it's been the same since we
signage.
purchased the property.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board before we open it up to public comment? Any other questions?
I don't.
Okay. All right, we will now open it up to public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this project?
There may be someone on Zoom.
No one in the audience, so
Nobody on Zoom?
Joanna, did you want to speak?
No, thanks. I didn't want to waste the planning board's time. I was just here in case anyone
Okay.
had any questions for me.
okay. So, is there any discussion of board members? Any comments, concerns before we take a vote?
I think we're as good as we're gonna get.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, do you want me to, do you want these two new letters read from the Historic District
Oh,
Commission?
yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a letter from the Historic District Commission dated April 7th, 2024. Dear Planning Board members, the Historic District Commission is writing to you with regard to the special permit application submitted by Oddfellows Project LLC, currently under review by your board. The property is located within the Chelmsford Historic District. Oddfellows Project LLC has been working with the HDC for the past few years relative to the ongoing renovation project. Oddfellows Project LLC has fully complied with the review standards of the Chelmsford Historic District Commission, as well as the conditions of the Certificate of Appropriateness with regard to exterior renovations completed to date. Oddfellows Project LLC has been dedicated to preserving the historic character of the building and has saved the structure from possible demolition. In doing so, they have shown a commitment to the continued revitalization of the town center. The members of the Historic District Commission unanimously agreed to submit this letter of support for the special permit application submitted by Oddfellows Project LLC. Sincerely, Historic District Commission, Brenda Lovering, Chair, and it lists all the members. And then from the Department of Public Works, this is dated April 8th, 2024. Sewer capacity fee for 41 to 44 Central Square. This office has reviewed your seating plan showing a total of 130 seats. Previously approved was 100 seats. This increase of 30 seats is subject to the following fee, and it goes through the calculation. And it basically says it results in 1,050 gallons per day. 41 to 44 Central Square is allowed an increase of 500 gallons per day. It then describes how the sewer fee will be, what it will be based on. It says this fee is paid at a 2-to-1 ratio at a cost of $35 per gallon increase. Another calculation is listed, and it says $38,500 to be paid prior to the certificate of occupancy. If you have any questions, please contact this office. Sincerely, Anthony Rapucci, Town Engineer.
Thank you.
And then we had an email that was circulated to the board from Lieutenant Jason Poor of the Chelmsford Police Department. I do not have any additional concerns about this project.
Okay, thank you. And just for the record, since Deirdre has been recused from this hearing, Joel, you are a voting member for this project. So I will take a motion at this time.
Well, I think first motion would be to close public hearing.
Yep.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
And I'll give you one to grant the special permit.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? No opposed? Thank you very much.
We thank you.
Good luck and
Thank you very much.
Welcome back.
I also wanted to actually say, I could have stood up and said it, I guess, in public hearing, but I didn't think it was appropriate. But I raised a lot of questions about the parking, and also Joanne raised a lot of questions about the ADA, and it seemed like, to me, they were adequately
Yeah.
addressed, and I appreciated that on the applicant's part, as an abutter. All right, so next up, we have, again, back to the MBTA overlay district. There was a presentation made since our last meeting, I believe, to FinCom, as well as, was FinCom?
No,
Well,
that was before.
Okay. There was one to the Select Board by Chris with some modifications from the prior. I don't know if you want to present the changes.
Version 6 slides, I think.
I think the last couple we got presented to the Select Board, but not
I'm trying to remember if we went over these already in this meeting.
I don't think so, because I think they came out of the
Out of FinCom.
Out of FinCom, okay.
FinCom.
Yeah, but we had a meeting after FinCom.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah, we did.
and I thought you presented these.
I'm losing track.
You did a great job.
I'm losing track of when I'm presenting.
Yeah, because we,
It doesn't hurt. to-
Maybe just,
Alright,
maybe
do
just
it.
jump,
Alright.
maybe just jump to public input.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, the slides have been presented multiple times. The only potential addition since the last meeting that we had was the slides on the development agreement, which I have since updated and edited the development agreement, not developer agreement, on my computer at home. But so this is the additional slides that I presented to Select Board about the development agreement being very low risk. Went through the rationale for why we felt it was low risk. The site is built out with the approved plans, not adequate space to locate a building and the required parking. Even if they did go through, they would have to re-permit, refinance, and essentially change some of the construction that's already happening. And that's very unlikely to happen. The next slide talks about the additional hurdles that they would have to go through, and then the next steps on the next slide after that. So I think we did go through these now that I'm reading them again.
Deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
So.
The feedback that we did get from Select Board on the 10th, or no, on the 8th, was that our messaging could be improved a little bit. They felt that we need to make sure, especially when we present at town meeting and talk to town meeting reps, they went back to look at the old town meeting video, and while the UMass overlay was designed using the draft of the MBTA zoning, that was not really used as a selling point for the overlay at town meeting. It was really sold as a community-based zoning approach. And the development agreement sometimes is being portrayed as the easiest path forward. So we have to make sure that we're careful with that wording. It's not the easiest. It's the best option for the town as a whole and least impactful. So that was some feedback that we got from the Select Board meeting. In addition to that, the Select Board would feel a lot more comfortable voting on this at their next meeting if we had letters from Trammell Crow and Choice that they're willing to modify the development agreement. So that way it is something a little bit more formalized. Another suggestion is to even have the two parties come and speak at town meeting, potentially verbally agreeing in person that they would do this after the town meeting vote. I don't know if that's even possible. And then the other point that was brought up at the Select Board meeting this week was it'd be nice to really get more definitive feedback from the state as to whether or not this will be the only change. These are the only changes that they'll be asking for. Based on town council's discussion with them, with the state, there were potentially other areas that they might have concerns with that development agreement. They were non-committal in that call that he had with them, so we don't have definitive information on that yet. So that was some of the feedback from Select Board.
Didn't they take a initial indication?
They did take a poll, a straw poll. All of them were in favor of supporting this, with some reservations, and a couple of them felt more comfortable if we had this additional input from the two parties and the state, if we can.
But the language has to be a certain way from them, from Trammell, so we're not red flagging again, basically.
Yep.
So I'm in process of scheduling that meeting for next week. Trammell Crow reps, choice reps, their attorneys, town attorney. Trammell Crow's initial response is, in lieu of having specific amendments presented to them, the best they will be able to do is the email that they've already provided. If specific amendments are presented to them, they will have legal review it, they'll have their financial partners review it, but they are not, at this point, they don't seem to be inclined to put anything in formal writing, committing to anything. So this kind of goes back to timing. We'll have this meeting. This meeting will take place before the Select Board meeting of the 22nd. Likely, there'll be some indication that can be provided to the board. Maybe between now and town meeting, maybe it's a little bit more formalized. Maybe they are willing to appear at town meeting. But in lieu of town council being able to engage with HLC's attorneys between now and town meeting, there really isn't going to be any definitive indication from HLC related to any other kind of ancillary or accessory provisions beyond unit capacity, age restrictions.
Can we do it, so sometimes in business, before we go into a formal contract, we do a letter of intent, which is very, very high level. That kind of says, basically, we agree that these would be the 3 points that we want to change, and we'll enter into a formal amendment, which is really, it's just a one-pager.
I think that's the goal between now and the 22nd.
Yeah. so
We'll
we
talk
could-
about that strategy.
They could respond to that.
Right, they could sign off on that. Like, the
Likely,
legal will
yeah.
have to look at it, because
Right,
it does
right.
involve in legal, like, there's no letter of
So
intent
that's
that won't involve
the goal.
legal.
I just don't know to what extent the Trammell Crow attorneys, are willing to do that.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
It seemed to me the other thing is that since the HLC is, at best, it sounds like non-committal, and the sense I got from, I don't know if it was Paul Haverty's words or one of the letters that he sent, was that it's not necessarily just us. Some of this is happening at a high level with regards to the finer points
Correct.
of the agreements. Like, it's not that they're boring down on our.
Correct. I mean, the best way to explain this is, I think when MBTA zoning was first rolled out, the state was far ahead of towns. Towns had to catch up. Now it's clear that as suburban towns are queuing up for preliminary review and actually voting and submitting, towns are now ahead of HLC.
And this is exactly why I think we should keep moving forward with this process, because the longer we wait, the more town plans the state will review, and the more they may start pushing back.
Or just new questions.
Or new questions and concerns. And if they raise those concerns before we pass something at town meeting, we're still bound by that initial December deadline. If we pass something at town meeting and it's accepted by the state as a new zoning bylaw, then that should buy us some time to be able to respond to the state's changes, because we would have to go through a full zoning bylaw change process again in order to do that.
That's maybe a good point to
Yeah.
add.
But if we delay, the longer we delay, the more likely it is that the state may find new things that they've got concerns about.
And the other point on that is, and I think council mentioned this, the town is proactively attempting to engage with HLC. So we've engaged, we've told them that, it's time sensitive. We've talked about the potential timeline, zoning adoption, and then development agreement amendments. The point being is that the town is actively and proactively trying to engage in a cooperative manner with HLC to resolve it, to make sure that we comply with the timelines.
So at the end of the day, if they do have further issues, it's not like we're in the situation of Milton where they're saying, no, we've submitted a plan, we've met,
Correct.
we've
Yeah.
worked with
Correct.
them,
Right.
we've
We've-
made
we've
amendments
asked-
as
We've
recommended.
asked HLC legal to prioritize us. We've explained why. The point being is that, and I think Chris is articulating this, if the state identifies some other new deficiency, they at least know who to contact, and they know that we're proactively engaged with them, trying to find out more information about their review.
In theory, that's true, but we were also very proactive as a town when this first came up, and the development agreement was being drafted, and they still didn't reach back out to us with the changes and concerns. They knew that this agreement was in place.
Little bit of different context.
Yeah.
Council mentioned that he, as part of the UMass West overlay zoning, did reach out, and the regulations weren't in place.
Right, or finalized.
Yeah. My point now is that, there's active engagement. They're aware of the time sensitivity and what the town is, trying to accomplish. And that's the best we can do at this point.
I personally think we could change the agreement right now. You go by that job site, they're not changing course at all, zero.
But I think there's good reasons for the timeline that's been laid out in
No,
terms
the
of.
July 1st is a good,
Yeah,
and can we have that agreement in place and not sign it before July 1st?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Start the process.
we talked about maybe, submitting it to HLC November, December.
Yep.
right. Okay. I'll take a motion to continue the public hearing.
I think what you want to do tonight, ideally, you would be able to close your public hearing and vote a recommendation. FinCom meets tomorrow night.
FinCom's not meeting tomorrow night.
Oh, FinCom is not meeting tomorrow
No,
night.
no, this would be, they didn't schedule a meeting. Their meeting, we'll have to present right before town meeting.
Doesn't FinCom need to know what
Planning
what the
board.
planning board's proposal is in order to publish a book?
So this wouldn't be in the book. The deadline to get it into the book, we would need to have it. We would need to have a meeting tomorrow night, which based off of what the select board meeting was Monday, the chair decided there's still enough things up in the air that he didn't schedule a meeting, based
Okay.
off of the discussion of the select board
So then,
meeting, yes.
I guess you could keep your hearing open. We can do the same for Monday's 22nd meeting with the select board. We can do a similar thing we did for the last meeting.
Doesn't hurt.
Would we keep it
Well,
open
we don't
all the
have another
way?
meeting, though.
We don't have another meeting.
We do not have another planning board
Oh.
meeting before
Right.
town meeting.
We would have to schedule a special meeting. The planning board's legally required to close the hearing and vote its recommendation to town meeting.
Can we do the same thing at a select board meeting, just have a
Why don't we do it now?
What,
Yeah.
Nothing's gonna
yeah.
change.
Just do it now.
Yeah, the only thing that's going to change is
No,
the
agreed,
text on the
agreed.
slides that we present.
Yeah, that's what, I think that's probably the best option.
All right.
We should hear from the public one more time, though.
Okay. I'll open that up to public comment.
Hi, Doreen Deschler, Precinct 9 rep. I want to know why you haven't told these people about the amendments the state has just asked, those 3 new amendments on capacity, affordability, and age restriction.
That's what we were just discussing.
That's what we're talking
We've been.
And we
Okay.
discussed
Been
it at our
discussing, and
last
we did-
meeting
and
as
we
well.
did discuss it last meeting.
Okay. Well, I'd like to know what if they're saying age restricted, which is what I've been saying all along. They're not going to agree to this age restricted thing because that's not in that's not what the law is. The as of right says no age restriction. So you keep saying that these people's places are going to be counted as multifamily housing for MBTA when they really aren't, because those are age restricted, so they cannot be counted as MBTA housing. And if we vote this in, if we say yes to this, we are giving up our constitutional right, for one. For two, they can do whatever you guys, as a right means that they can do what they want. They don't have to go by what we say. They don't have to ask our input. They don't have to know that. They can do what they want. If this developer who is developing, okay, you say he's in good faith and he's doing what, he said he was going to do and all that, that's great. But if he decides a little further down the line that, oh, wait a minute, I want to put more units in and make more money, he can do that because now it's MBTA zoned, so he can build as of right. No, he can build as of
Darlene,
right.
Thank you. It's zoned as of right, and he's building it as we speak.
She missed the last meeting.
Yeah, she wasn't here the last.
Yeah, so she may want to go back and watch the last
watch
meeting.
the
And
last
also, I also recommend watching the FinCom meeting, because that was explained in great detail at the FinCom meeting as well.
And the select board meeting this week.
And the
Yes.
select board meeting.
Same points.
Okay.
Anybody else from public?
I don't know what's gonna come out, but, because I'm still confused. So I'm not sure about, okay, so I'll just start my feelings and ask some questions. If this is zoned for the MBTA, and so they're in process of building, and I was told that they could not put any more, but now I'm getting this feeling that we need, 77 more units?
No,
We don't
it has
need-
to be zoned. It has to be zoned as a whole district to have the right amount of capacity. And the way we wrote a development agreement, or the select board did with the
Right.
developer, development agreement,
13 units per acre. It needs to be 15.
which is,
But I thought it came
which-
back as they want more density.
no.
And they're looking for
The
more
development
units.
agreement is in conflict with the MBTA zoning. So we can't have the development agreement stipulate a lower density is available for zoning than the MBTA's district zoning stipulates.
All
doesn't-
along, they could have done 15
So
units per acre.
to be clear, the developer doesn't want more units. They're not asking to build more units. The town doesn't want more units. We just have to zone it and make sure that that agreement that we tied to the land matches the zoning. But they don't want more units, we don't want more units. It costs them too much money
No
to.
place.
And there's no room for them to build the additional units. But from a paper perspective, it all has to
It has to
tie and abide by
To
the
be
law.
consistent. At the moment, it's not consistent.
Okay, but I can't believe, I don't know. I can't believe that this developer, if he has a chance to put more units, won't. Developers always leave a little room for squiggle room.
They
And I
had the
don't think-
opportunity.
What?
They had the opportunity. The UMass West zoning overlay allows 15 units an acre. They
Why
came
wouldn't
in,
he do that?
they proposed 13 units an acre.
So if he goes through MBTA, why can't he put more? If he could find a spot up there
Evan, can you pull
I
up the
think
slides?
he's so ahead of us, this developer, that he could find a spot. They haven't poured the foundations for the buildings, they've only poured foundations for the townhouses.
They've done the permitting on the sewer treatment already. It took a very long time.
They have the money to change all that and change all their plans.
They're
It-
not
it would-
inclined.
It would
They really
certainly
aren't
be
inclined.
feasible, money-wise.
So what we talked about earlier
The next one.
is that we've had initial conversations with Trammell Crow, and what you're hearing the planning board say is exactly what they've initially said. But between now and the 22nd, we're trying to schedule a meeting so that we can get something more formal that can be presented to the
Yeah,
community.
because they sound like they're kind of being a little cagey there to me.
Well, I can tell you definitively that it was the town who brought this to their attention. They're not tracking the MBTA zoning, because their project is fully permitted and they're
I
building
think
it.
they're so far ahead of us that they've already planned this out in the development.
No, I mean, they're at a point
They would
where
have to come
this
back
is gonna
for
cost them a
site
lot
plan
of
review
money.
again.
So to me, it'd be worth it for them. It's just
They
like
would stop the project right
Windermere
now,
was supposed to be
come
buildings
back
out
in front
there.
of the planning board for another year and do site plan review. There's many reasons. We went over them the last meeting, if you watched the last meeting.
I've been watching them, and I'm trying to understand, but
There's
there's too many, like,
there's no physical space to put 77 units in parking in that lot, in that
if there
area.
was, if that builder came back and said, oh, I guess I'll try to do it,
He can't.
Would have to go up, and we have a
We,
limit on
you,
that
you
in our
can't
zone.
add stories. They're at the limit. They would have to move buildings around in their plans.
So
They'd
if
have to
he
do a
did that, he
complete
could.
redesign. They would have to completely redesign and re-permit the wastewater treatment plant for the additional capacity.
That's another year.
That's a multi-year process and multi-millions of dollars. They would have to go back before the Conservation Commission and Planning Board for more site reviews, which is more additional years. They would have to go back to the North Chelmsford Water District to add water capacity, which is more time and money because they would
May
have
or
to
may not
pay
be
additional
available.
fees for that. And
The energy stretch.
the
code.
energy stretch code itself is another concern because right now they're permitted based on the older energy code. If after July 1st, when we amend that agreement, if they pull new permits for additional buildings or changes to buildings, they would have to redesign all of their buildings to meet those new, more strict and much more expensive energy codes. And all of that would add additional time and significant cost to their development for only 77 units. It's not feasible. They would lose money on that.
And don't they also have an agreement with the abutters?
Yes.
That they would have to, in order to find the space, because they can't go up, and they would have to redesign that, they would have to have their agreement, like they may have to go and renegotiate all of that in order to fit this all in. So that's why they're not even, when they first came here, and as Evan had said, they had the ability to request 15, the density of 50, of the same density. And had we not done this developer agreement and tied it to the land, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, because they would just be, this would have just gone over for zoning. But because we did this ahead of time, they're not looking for additional density. We don't want additional density. We just need everything to tie and all match.
so where do we find these extra units? That
We
this-
don't,
We
we
don't.
don't,
We
we
just zone
don't.
it for it.
We don't have
That's
to
No,
why
I
we
don't
picked
mean
that area.
there, I
We're
don't mean
zoning.
there, I mean, didn't they turn down our,
As long as we don't limit this
I
density.
don't, I mean the state, didn't they
No.
turn down our proposal?
They said
That's why we're
we
here again?
can't stipulate in the development agreement the lower density.
13 units per acre. We cannot
So we
have that
can't
in
have
there.
that
We're
word.
gonna
We have that
change-
on paper.
On paper,
We
that's
have
the
to
issue.
remove that.
They want us to remove that line
Because
in that agreement.
Otherwise,
So-
our development agreement and the zoning for the same piece of land don't match. So we need to have them match. So
So the state's gonna say, okay, you guys can't find a spot for 177 more units that we want.
it's, first of all, it's 77, but second of all, it's zoning, not building.
1,407.
The zoning bylaw in the two districts that the planning board presented,
I'm sorry, what?
the zoning bylaw in the two districts that the planning board presented,
Right.
the state has indicated those are compliant.
Oh,
even though they're already built up.
So for purposes of complying with MBTA regulations, the planning board's proposal is compliant. What has been flagged is provisions within the development agreement, as the board has articulated, are not consistent with the MBTA regulations. But the planning board's proposal is compliant. The zoning bylaw and the zoning maps, the town meeting will vote on.
okay. So I have a question about one of the things that's going on up there. Is that all right to ask that?
I know that we'll have an answer, but
I was under the impression that the wetlands, especially one of the ponds where we had geese and ducks and everything, was going to be kind of protected, but there isn't a tree or anything around them. That's wide open, all dug up now. What happened to that protection?
You're referring to the conservation restriction?
Yeah.
Yep, so that's in progress. It takes some time, but I can tell you while a lot of trees have been cut down, it's fully compliant with the trees that were intended to be cut down.
Really?
Mhm.
So how was that going to protect all that pond with all our nature stuff and our ducks and geese and I thought that
There's replanting, right?
Well, they're going to do some landscaping, but the Conservation Commission, fully approved the protection of the wetland area. It was all reviewed and approved.
right. That's what I thought. But when I saw every tree cut down, also the
I
wetlands,
mean, a lot of that
the water's getting
vegetation around
extremely
the.
high down there. It's almost as high as the road.
Yeah, that was mentioned at the
That was
Concom last night.
Yeah, that was last night
That-
at the
that's-
conservation.
That
meeting.
has nothing to do with flooding or erosion due to the project. We've had a lot of rain and the water
High
table's
water
really high.
table right now.
Every body of water is
Well,
higher
yeah.
than it usually is.
Okay, we'll see what happens with that.
Well, didn't have one.
Just to speak about the water situation that you were saying it was high, I've lived there for 30 years. Never, we've had flooding before, never seen the water that high before. I just want to put that out there. I look out my window, there's no there's nothing catching the rainwater. It's just all coming down, all that dirt, and just flooding the whole area. I just want to say that.
The Conservation Commission is going to take a look at that.
They're going to take a look. What jumped out at me last night, just to close the loop on this, I think someone asked if the water in the wetland was murky or brown. The answer I think that was provided was no.
I don't remember what it might
So
be, yeah.
if it were brown, that would be a clear indication of sediment coming off the site into the resource area. There's water in places in town, in people's yards and basements that have never had water.
Pumps that aren't shutting off.
The water table is extremely high. We've had tremendous amount of precipitation.
We've had this much water before.
Well, it's cumulative.
Never happened until all these trees were cut down. I'm just going to say
The
that.
commission will look into it, but as of right now, I mean, there's no documented
They
violations.
are going to look into it, right?
Yeah.
They are.
They said they were going to
Yep.
look into it.
Well, I'll make a motion to close public input.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Next up.
And we've
You want
approved
to
it.
take, you taking a motion to
Approve-
recommend?
Yeah, I make a motion to recommend the MBTA zoning article as written.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next up, we have 270 Billrica Road, DH Holdings. Planning board will consider modifying or rescinding a minor mod.
High five. He's off the bench.
Madam Chair, can I begin?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. Douglas DeShane from Finneran and Nicholson here representing the applicant. I'd like to introduce the team that we have with us this evening. I'm Sure many of you are familiar with the players, but Casey Ferrara from Howard Stein Hudson, our civil engineering company, Ed Weigel, our LSP from Rue Associates, and at the far end of the group, Michael Bennett, who is the head of development for DH Property Holdings. We're here this evening to continue our discussion of a modification. As you may know, we did recently receive a peer review from the town's peer review beta. In providing that peer review, Beta touched on our stormwater, proposed stormwater system, our RAM plan, and our soil management plan for the site. We were actually here last evening meeting with the Conservation Commission. I think we had a very positive meeting with the commission. We went through although some of the members and David had not had time to fully review the beta report, we did present our interpretation of the report, as I'm going to allow Casey and Ed to do in just a moment. But I do want to say that, again, we felt very positive about last night's meeting. We had agreed that there was nothing in that peer review report or requirements of that report that were problematic for us, and that we felt we could meet all of the terms and conditions that Beta had proposed. In fact, there was some debate whether the commission was going to close the hearing last night, but it sounded like they couldn't get an order of conditions ready for the next meeting. So they did agree to keep the meeting open so that they could do a better review of the peer review. We have committed to submit the required changes that the peer review letter asked for, and we're going to get that to the commission in the next couple of weeks with the hopes that they will in fact close and modify our permit at the next hearing. So with that, I would like to let Casey and then Ed go over the peer review letter with you and our interpretation and what we're committed to do. So thank you for your time, and we'll answer any questions you have once they get done.
While Casey's going up to the podium, the LSP and the civil from Beta are on Zoom for this evening.
Perfect.
All right, good evening to the board. Casey Ferrer with Howard Stein Hudson. So I asked Evan to pull up this plan mostly because this is where the vast majority of changes occurred within our plan. We did split the plan in half just for readability, so I'm going to focus mostly on this side, but I'll describe what the changes are. We're on the other side. So a general overview as part of the working group that we were in from sometime November-ish until a few months ago. The outcome for my design-wise was we need to remove our infiltration. That would provide a comfort level that any PFAS would not be further spread and mitigation could occur if we remove the infiltration from the site. In doing so, what we lose from that is not anything related to peak discharges or volumes, because we are still a redevelopment, so we can still meet our peak discharges and peak volumes without infiltration, but what we do lose is phosphorus treatment. Phosphorus treatment is not regulated by the state, but it is regulated by the town within the town stormwater regulations. So replacing the two infiltration systems that we had on this side of the site, this right-hand side with the loading docks, to create new phosphorus treatment, we've taken all the catch basins that we previously proposed and fitted them with a product called the Fabco Storm Basin. What these are is they're inserts into a typical catch basin. They're no special catch basins. It's a typical catch basin. It's an insert that you drop right into the rim, and then you can fit cartridges within those inserts. They have several different types of cartridges. The one we need for phosphorus treatment is called a nutrients cartridge. These nutrients cartridges gain 60% removal if designed in conformance with the manufacturer's recommendations. I worked very closely with the manufacturer, who is again Ferguson, who is also the manufacturer, the value-added reseller for the Focal Point that you might recall that we've had significant conversations about. But so all of these storm basins and flows to these catch basins is designed in conformance with their requirements to gain that 60% phosphorus removal. As a redevelopment, the town regulation states that we need to meet 50% phosphorus removal, so we are in excess of that. Additionally, the roof also went to those infiltration basins, so we also have to treat the roof for phosphorus. Where the roof does not go into a catch basin, we had to provide structural treatment for that phosphorus. That is through a manufacturer called Contech. They have a product called the Jellyfish. That Jellyfish is basically the same cartridges, just in a structure that goes underground. And since the roof area is significantly larger, there is much more cartridges underground. That Jellyfish structure is rated for 55%, so again, that's greater than the required 50%. And that allows us to, while we remove the infiltration and remove the phosphorus removal from that infiltration, we gain that back through proprietary devices. Without the infiltration, now the stormwater flow path is basically into these catch basins, through trunk lines of drainage, and out to the original discharge point, which is at the top left of the building. On the left-hand side, I will just say the brief changes that we had on that left-hand side, or Evan can pull it up. So we're maintaining that focal point structure that's on the left-hand side over in the middle of the parking area. It's in an island. That focal point basically takes in a bunch of sheet flow through Rain Guardian pre-treatment units, goes into the focal point, treats all of the water, and then that discharges to a separate area on the bank from that main trunk line from the other side. I will state that since the last time that I've done a technical presentation before you, I believe, the focal point has received an EPA guidance, EPA Boston specifically. That guidance basically listed out requirements for this focal point's design criteria, and if you meet all of these, which we do, and we lay that out within our supplemental data report how we meet them, it actually gets 76% phosphorus. So there was an original question about how do we assign a phosphorus value if DEP does not accept it. Where DEP does not accept any devices, EPA has stepped in and said, if you follow this guidance, you're granted 76%, or we believe that it will meet 76%. The last change that we made on this left-hand side was we did have to add in a detention system. So it's going to be fully lined. It's not an infiltration system. All it is we're offsetting enough flow to offset the peak discharge rate out to the wetlands so that we still maintain our peak discharges from pre-development to post-development to continue to meet the stormwater bylaws, both from Mass DEP and the town stormwater regulations. We did receive peer review from Beta. I assume you'll want to allow them to address that, but I will just note that everything within that peer review we can address and we will agree to, and we have no further comments regarding that. We'll have a submission that addresses everything within there. And I can either turn it over to Ed or we can talk stormwater.
Let's go to Ed. I think the stormwater seems pretty straightforward.
Good evening. I'm Ed Weigel. I'm an LSP with Rue Associates. And I guess just to start, we're working with the work group that was formed by the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission and their LSP. And we work together to develop basically an additional plan to sample soil, as part of addressing some of the requirements that the state DEP has with respect to how you manage soil at a construction site, soil and groundwater. So working with Beta, we came up with a plan which was agreed to by the working group, and we went out and we collected some additional soil data. And most of that soil data shows that there aren't too many places on the site where the soil is contaminated, where it contains exceedances as per the state requirements. I think all in total here, the assessment that we've done out here, we analyzed 24 soil samples. I think 21 of them were either clean or below standards. So that gives some perspective of sort of how much contamination is out here. There's not really much. And it's, not widespread at all. And most of the sampling that we've done indicates that there's not much of a problem out here in the soil. That having been said, we are agreeing to treat all the soil in the vadose zone, basically the area of the subsurface where the high groundwater or the groundwater table meets the vadose zone, as being as if all the soil in this area was contaminated, even though a lot of our sampling shows that it's not. So what we would do is we would manage the soil as if it was contaminated during construction. So if we pull soil out from structures or foundations or drain lines, the soil would be pulled aside, put in a pile while construction goes on. And then when we're done, we'd test it and figure out where we needed to find a home for it, probably a permitted facility. We just sort of addressing some of Beta's comments with respect to the groundwater. We know that the groundwater is pretty uniformly impacted across the site. So wherever excavations get down into groundwater, we are going to need to manage that groundwater. And what we, based on the comments that Beta has provided, what we can clarify in our soil and groundwater management plan, and the RAM plan, which we have to submit to the state before we're allowed to do any construction out here. We can modify that plan, amend it, basically to describe in a little more detail how we're going to manage the water that we have to pump out of the ground while we're installing the various building elements and subsurface utilities. What we're proposing to do is to run that water through a carbon filter, pretty standard treatment technology. It's been widely used in a lot of applications. And then to put that water back into the ground at the location where it's been withdrawn. I think one of the other things that we want to address is Mass DEP. As you folks know, while we've been going through this process, the state reached out to me and they had some questions about the filing that we had made with the state with respect to the downgrading property status. We discussed that and we told them that, as part of the working group and as part of planning for managing soil and groundwater during redevelopment, we had gone out and we had collected additional soil data, and the state requested that, and we provided that to the state for their review. The other thing that DEP asked for was another round of groundwater samples. So we collected those samples and provided that information to the state and also to you. And based on these additional data, we don't feel or believe that the status that we filed with state DEP has changed at all. And the state hasn't said anything yet, although one thing that they have done is, based on the information that we provided them, they have asked an upgrading abutter to take a look at their groundwater to see if there's an issue there that they need to address. So that having been said, I think one of the things that we wanted to be clear about was, should the state have further communications with myself or the applicant, we want you folks to know that we will advise you of those communications promptly and, make sure that the planning board has a full understanding of what the state is asking for and sort of how we're going to respond to that. So the applicant is committing to that to keep the town appraised of any developments with the state DEP. Also, with respect to the state, one of the things that DEP does is they ask questions and they ask for more information, or they'll issue correspondence that says, we need this or we need that. The DEP doesn't typically, if ever, issue correspondence that says, we're happy, you can proceed. So while I can understand that there would be some desire to have a letter like that from Mass DEP with respect to this project and the status of the site, I don't see a letter coming if everything's okay. If everything's okay, they're going to go and look at somebody else to find some issues out there. So, that having been said, I just want to thank the working group particularly and Beta for working with us to try to resolve some of the challenging technical issues that are here at the site. And we're committed to continuing to address concerns that the state might have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the LSP or comments?
I have a number of questions, but I didn't know whether we wanted to hear from peer review first.
Let's hear from peer review first.
Want to hear from civil or from LSP first?
Same order, civil and then LSP.
Okay, so Stephen, I guess that's you first.
That's me. Hello, this is Stephen Borgatti from Beta. I think I can keep this brief. So this project has gone through many rounds of reviews by this point, and the applicant has pretty thoroughly addressed most of our previous comments. The ones that remain are mostly related to documentation, operation, and maintenance. And the applicant has stated both now and at last night's Conservation Commission meeting that they have no issue with the remaining comments. So if they can address those comments either before the next hearing or possibly as a condition, I think they should be in pretty good shape.
Stephen, this is Joel Luna. One question I have is, could you elucidate on what some of those concerns about O&M are? Since a number of questions I had were about the O&M as well.
Yes. So just from the letter, we have 4 comments. We wanted some inspection and maintenance, and I'm looking at comment SW5, which I see you have up on the TV. We want inspection and maintenance for the oil booms and shutoff valve. This is a site where spill prevention and spill control is particularly important, so we want to make sure that's covered in the O&M plan. SW6 is just a standard requirement from the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. We ask that these O&M plans have a map showing the location of all stormwater control measures, so all the catch basins, the focal point, any other things like that, which we expect would be given to the people doing operation and maintenance so that they know exactly where everything is and they don't accidentally miss a structure that needs to be inspected. SW7 is just a requirement to submit an annual report just to keep the town aware of how operation and maintenance is going. And then SW8 is just to have the owner sign the O&M plan to make sure that they're aware of what the applicant is proposing for inspection and maintenance, and they are aware of what needs to happen to keep the facility operational. So we don't expect any of these to be a particularly heavy lift. It's just to make sure that the site is properly maintained. Since there are wetlands nearby, there are a number of catch basins, water quality units, and other stormwater control measures.
I was wondering if you could comment on the jellyfish inspection and maintenance, because that one seemed to be a lot more complicated than a lot of the other ones.
They are complicated, and it will come down to the applicant conveying the requirements to the owner. Fortunately, with a lot of these proprietary units, the manufacturer has a detailed list of what tasks actually need to be done. So it is more complicated, and we would want the applicant to make sure the owner knows what needs to be done. They have a plan in place to actually have that inspection and maintenance be performed.
Yeah, as opposed to, like, say, the focal point or the rain guardian, whose maintenance looks like it's designed to be performed by somebody of landscaping skill, but not necessarily, of a higher skill level. In the case of the jellyfish, do you feel that that is an adequate level of skill at that same level, or do you think that the jellyfish would require somebody of a higher skill level? And the reason I'm asking that is because there's a number of places in there where it says, be careful not to, damage this or to damage that, and you lift it out with a special device, et cetera, et cetera. And my question then is, and it's related also to the cost estimate for the O&M. Do you think that there's special skills that are needed in particular for that maintenance?
Yeah, you ask very good questions, and it might be something that the applicant can perhaps illuminate us on. They are more complicated than simply mowing a lawn or cleaning out sediment. But we see proprietary units installed on a lot of sites, so and it's really up to the owner to make sure that they get qualified personnel to handle these things. So it is more complex. It might require a little extra training for operation and maintenance personnel, but it's really up to the owner to make sure that they can handle it.
Sure. And just as suggested, I can just address that a little bit. So the property owner is basically going to have to be required to hire out maintenance of catch basins, jellyfish, these Fabco systems, and as stated, the manufacturer of the proprietary system does issue guidance on how to maintain these. It'll be up to the applicant to find a qualified party that can maintain them responsibly, and as well, Contact themselves can help guide a responsible party on how to maintain it properly without damaging the system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, how do we ensure that as much as possible from this side of things, as opposed to once it's in place and in operation? Because to me, there's a significant difference between the focal point and the jellyfish.
Sure, and all those inspection reports are going to have to be issued to DPW, so they're going to have a detailed listing of what they did and how they did it. So, or DPW can request that kind of information. So if DPW feels that they're out of compliance with the provided guidance that we have in the O&M plan that goes to DPW, and DPW or even the Conservation Commission will also have jurisdiction over it, can basically ask those questions and make sure that they're within compliance.
Also, since you're here.
Sure.
The spill response procedures, 2.17, it makes reference to an infiltration pond and also a unified response manual and the Rentham police.
You talking about the long-term pollution prevention plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that whole plan is going to be revamped specifically for a comment from the Conservation Commission last night, so we'll address a lot more detail and more information to be within that.
Okay, good. That's good. In the case of the Fabco Storm Basin filter cartridges and the Fabco Oil Boom X filters, are those the same thing?
No. So the storm basins are inserts that go within it. The oil boom is an added device that can go within the storm basin. They are sold separately. They can be installed together. If we haven't provided the details of them both, I believe Beta asked us to. So we'll provide the details on how those get installed with separate systems and then also together.
Okay, so if you could also make sure that the naming and so forth is consistent throughout, because I didn't know which one was which. When I think one is in the list at the very beginning, and then there was one that was referenced in the details.
Sure.
The CDS treatment unit, I don't think there's a log for that.
On the operation and maintenance?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll add that in.
Okay. How did you arrive at the costs, and in particular for because I noticed they look to be about the same range. How did you arrive at the cost for, say, the jellyfish in particular?
I believe the jellyfish was taken in collaboration with the manufacturer. I know most of our costs we either take from DEP guidance or from known costs that we've had in the past. So when there's ranges, we've seen that some things can be as cheap as this or as expensive as this, but I believe for the jellyfish we took that from Contact representatives themselves.
Okay. Okay, so do you think that those are are good estimates, or would you want to revisit some of them based on our conversation tonight?
Well, I can certainly reach out to contact and make sure that those are still accurate numbers,
Okay.
if you'd like, and we can update them as such.
Okay. And then, in general, the use of the store, how many, well, first of all, how many jellyfish are there?
Two.
So, there's two, okay.
Two
And then how
jellyfish.
many of the storm basin filter cartridges and oil boom things, that's for every catch basin?
So every catch basin of the 9 have the storm basin. Some of them are double, some of them are single, depending on the flow rates that go within them. And then just the 4 catch basins within the loading docks have the oil booms.
Okay, okay. So it gives us some idea as to what the scope of the thing is. So are those then providing, how is the TSS being provided? And in particular, because the catch basin insert providing TSS, does that comply with the stormwater standard?
So the catch basin insert, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we got the TSS from the manufacturer.
Okay.
And I believe we provided the supplemental data of that within the supplemental data report to say where we got those numbers from. And we basically used that within the treatment trains and the calculations in the supplemental data report to meet standard 4.
Okay. And because it wasn't clear to me that, I mean, I know you can use things within catch basins, but my understanding that was pretreatment, not necessarily.
So are you asking the question, why are we including the 25% pretreatment from a deep sump-footed catch basin while we also have a pretreatment at the rim? Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah.
I'm revising that and taking that out.
Okay. Okay.
That was one of Beta's comments as well.
Okay. And just the question of, can it be considered providing treatment if using inserts in catch basins is for pretreatment? Just the old question of, can you use pretreatment as essentially treatment? So
you're referring to CB9 in the back left that then discharges?
Yeah, I must be.
So that what we've done is I've provided that catch basin receives flow that would be considered de minimis per the stormwater standards, and I've addressed that as well and how it meets that criteria. So that can be treated to the maximum extent practicable and then discharged directly to the bank.
Okay, but you have that in your report?
I believe that's at the tail end of standard 4.
Okay, I'll look there. And then in particular, the frequency of the cleaning of well, at least in the jellyfish, that it wasn't clear from what it was in the detailed instructions, but it wasn't clear up front that the frequency is to be 4 times in the first year and then to be reassessed after that point as to how frequently it should be done after that. And so that would be one thing I would ask, is that
we can assign a
that
definite
frequency be
number.
made more clear up front.
We can assign a definite number to that. I think that was also going to be a question of one of the commissioners.
Okay.
In the backwashing after high volume, how is that going to be handled?
So what is it?
It calls for backwash after high volume.
A high volume storm event.
Is that going to be?
So
part of
that'll
the
be done.
maintenance
That'll be done in coordination with the manufacturer. The manufacturer will have to provide guidance on how and when we have to do that. I can reach out to them and get a more detailed plan on how that can happen if you'd like.
Sounds pretty costly. The whole thing sounds very costly.
It is, well, any kind of subsurface phosphorus treatment
It's-
is fairly costly, but it's a requirement of the town and where we can't have infiltration.
How many of these are you going to have on site?
The jellyfish, 2.
2.
One is of underground vault and then one is just in a manhole.
I mean, and I'll just make a comment. In general, we went from a project where the O&M was pretty straightforward to one where, at least in my judgment, it's become a lot more complicated. And in cases like that, at least historically, I've always valued having a performance guarantee set aside to ensure that the maintenance will be performed at least for the first 2 years. Particularly in the case that it gets handed over to somebody else. I want to be sure that the funds are there to ensure that somebody isn't going to cut corners in the maintenance when it appears that at least the maintenance right now is a higher
Yeah,
higher issue
every
than it was
5 years,
before.
they have to replace the tentacles in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can agree to that.
Okay. And that's it for, those are the questions I have for stormwater.
Okay.
Anyone else?
It's kind of a major change.
What's that?
It's a major change to what we had originally seen.
It is substantial.
One of the things I wanted to point out to the board from last night's commission meeting, something that I don't think has been done on the projects to date, but there was an agreement that the O&M and the long-term pollution prevention plan will be standalone and given to the employees as part of training. So that's.
It'll be on-site. then.
Yeah, it'll be on-site.
That makes sense.
So that's another additional type thing that we haven't seen in a lot of
Safety.
other.
Well, just to clarify, we kind of nixed the idea of a standalone document. What we said was we could take the appendix that is essentially in itself a standalone document, and we'll add that as a chapter to what they'd be trained on. Just for clarification's sake.
Who in town is going to enforce this after this is this the DPW, or is this, who enforces this in a year from now on the maintenance? And
So what's
just my, I don't know.
I mean, well, that was actually one of the things I was going to ask, is that because this site is of particular concern or interest to the board, that I was going to suggest that we also have the report sent to us, and I would certainly be more than happy to review it. 'Cause I think we have a real interest in ensuring that this is operated and performs in a way that we think it should be operated and performed.
Conservation, I believe, is requesting the same thing.
Okay.
And so is DPW. So
Yeah, I know DPW gets it, but.
we were happy to provide additional documentation.
It's all pretty
to the planning
standard
board.
as being discussed. DPW, under the new federal permit, is required to ensure submission. They're not necessarily obligated to physically inspect for compliance, but they're obligated to ensure that the reports are submitted. So that's a step in the right direction. To Joel's point, I think that was used on 40Bs, the performance guarantee. I think that's a good idea. And the other technique that's been talked about, kind of in theory, is to what extent and when is it appropriate to require a third party, someone who's like a civil engineering firm, someone that's a professional firm, to do the third party inspections after the maintenance people do them.
So like an audit of the report or an audit of the
Of the
process?
physical inspections and maintenance. So there's a variety of techniques we can think about, because this site clearly it's different than other sites.
Yeah, and in particular, because we would be putting it in our conditions that they follow the O&M, so to have us get through, at least have some sort of oversight into that, helps us to ensure that our conditions are actually being complied with. And in this particular case, I think that is of real interest to us.
I didn't hear what you just said.
I'm sorry.
I mean, just the
You
last
said it so
sentence.
eloquently. It's a good idea.
All right. Is there anyone else that has questions for either the,
Well, I think I'd like to go to the LSP next, then, if we're
well, I
done
meant,
with the stormwater.
let's,
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, on stormwater, yeah.
So,
I don't have any questions or comments on stormwater, but I do on site plans, since this is the first time we've seen the site plan, so we can do that after the LSP, I guess.
okay. So who's that individual?
Rob, you want to walk through your review?
You guys are you guys are on much earlier tonight than you were last night.
Yeah, that's appreciated. So Robert
You
Smith here.
you were looking a little tired last night.
So Robert Smith, LSP with Beta Group. And yeah, just to go through our comments, I agree with Ed Weigle's characterization. Overall, we had fairly minor comments on the RAM plan and the soil and groundwater management plans. Really the first 6 comments that I had were regarding the infiltration of treated groundwater back to the subsurface. We didn't have any indication in the plan where that water would be discharged back to, which could invoke some other requirements under the MCP. During last night's meeting, I did provide some clarification, as he also discussed tonight, going back to the excavation, and also agreed to provide some additional design parameters on their treatment system. I do think their treatment system, it was fairly conservative as far as wanting to sort of treat through carbon and verify through testing prior to discharge. I think that's a positive. But it is good to have that upfront within the RAM plan, just to be able to review those parameters. There was some fairly minor sort of monitoring requirements. Comment number 3, that sort of goes away as far as discharging back to the excavation. And really comment 2, that's something that they agreed to add to their plan. Same thing for comment 4. The last 3 comments really pertaining to more to soil management, and so the comment number 7, we're just looking for information on where contaminated soil would be placed back on the site. They're going to be excavating contaminated soil from the subsurface, the Nevado zone, where impacts are identified. Just wanted some details on where that would be placed. That was to be placed below impervious surfaces, and potentially disposed off-site at a treatment facility. Comment number 8. There was basically the plan did reference erosion control around stockpiles. So specifically that would be contaminated stockpiles. So we're just looking for a little more detail with respect to that, and specifically near wetland features. Yeah, my last comment was just pertaining to really sort of defining exclusion zones. So those are areas on a site, basically delineating where do you have contaminated soil versus potentially other clean soil or other materials that would be managed on the site. And, also having just some decontamination procedures. If you're using equipment and it becomes contaminated, just want to see that there's a good procedures just to make sure that contaminated soil isn't, spread beyond the site boundaries or able to, impact a resource area. That's about all I have.
One question I have is, do you have an estimate or an idea of how much soil we're talking about?
Let's see. I think Ed could probably answer that better.
We think it's roughly on the order of about 500 yards. It's probably less than that, but we want to give a conservative estimate just because when we dig, it's not an exact science, and we want it to have allowances. If it was more than 200 yards, there's no point in cutting it close. We're going to manage the soil as required by DEP.
So how large of a stockpile? I'm just trying to think of, like, if you're excavating soil that you're quarantining or whatever, you know, how much, like, what volumes are we talking about? What's coming out of the ground versus what's being stockpiled?
So most of the soil that is going to be excavated is not considered to be contaminated. That's basically the soil.
Right.
In areas where we've tested where it's been shown to be clean. You know, that soil, we're not counting in that 500 yards.
Right.
The 500 yards is basically the soil that is within a 2-foot horizon right around the high groundwater table in locations where the building foundation goes that deep and also where utilities and structures are placed.
So how would somebody know where it is that they're supposed to start quarantining soil?
That'll be based on the soil management plan, you know, which will say which says soil in this area is treated this way and soil in this area is treated that way.
But it wasn't in the soil management.
Well, I think that was what Rob had asked us to clarify.
Okay. So there's still to be a map identifying locations?
Well, the map is the civil plan from Casey, because what that map shows is where we need to do excavations in order to install various development features.
But I'm trying to understand, like, if I'm the guy who's digging, what am I using to tell me, you know, at what point do I stop treating it like it's clean soil and I start treating it like it's contaminated soil?
Visually, the soil will start to get moist, but it's based on depth.
Well, I thought you were using the Vados zone, so that's seasonal high groundwater, so that's not necessarily going to be moist.
Well, at the top of the capillary fringe, it's still moist, and that's where the groundwater meets the Vados zone.
I thought there was some
Yeah.
talk about you were willing, or even recommended, having a third-party construction monitoring
Right.
or inspector.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm not exactly sure what that person
Yeah.
does or how often they're
Right.
there.
The-
But it
the
sounds like
applicant-
sounds like the construction needs LSP expertise on site or someone who's knowledgeable about.
Yeah, I apologize. It was late last night, and I'm a little frazzled tonight. So that was another thing I forgot to mention, is that the applicant will agree to have a third party come onto the site and observe construction activities to make sure that, you know, they're being
We've done
executed
that with
appropriately.
40B, and I don't think
No,
it
yeah.
was the same level of complexity as this.
I was just, I was not under the impression that seasonal high groundwater was moist. So I'm back to the question, I would have thought that you would have said, in these designated areas where I circle areas on the map or what have you, that when you go down X feet, beyond X feet, you are now going to treat that as contaminated soil. That's what I would have thought, that's how I'd be doing it. So I guess I would like to, either Rob or Stephen, I don't know if you have an opinion on that one, on the question of, is seeing if the soil is moist sufficient for determining that that's actually the point of seasonal high groundwater?
Well, I think I can weigh in there. So I would suggest, I mean, we did complete some, or RU completed soil borings. It was a pretty focused program within areas of disturbance where we've identified, it was basically a vertical profile, with PFAS sampling. So I think that's very helpful to establish, an actual depth below grade, which I think is much simpler than, trying to identify potentially like where you have necessarily wet soil. I would suggest that using that approach, I mean, we have that area pretty well established as far as the vertical profile for PFAS.
I think what we could do then is we could certainly, with some of the revisions that we'll be providing for the soil management plan and the RAM plan, we can include a little more detail about where excavations will get down into this area where we believe the contamination could be located, and then we'll specify that in our revised plan.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And then what are you using as the estimate for the seasonal high groundwater?
Basically, it varies throughout the site.
Now, what's the basis? I mean, are you using the test pit as the basis?
I guess it depends on what location we're looking at. If he has a boring that's closer, then we can use where he found it, or if we have a test pit that's in that location, the test pit's going to be more accurate.
Okay. And as you remember during the working group, I raised the issue that there seemed to be some question about the variability of those levels because of what appeared to be a contradiction between the test pit seasonal high groundwaters and the groundwater gradients, which indicated that you would be going from a higher elevation to a lower elevation, but when you look at the test pits, the one at the supposedly lower elevation actually has a higher seasonal high groundwater than the one that you would have expected to be higher. So a conservative value, and that's why I was raising the question as I raised it at the very beginning of, and this is where the question for the whole board comes into play, is whether we would want there to not have you go down. You wanted to, this whole thing is predicated on wanting to drop the site level by 2.5 feet or 3 feet, depending. And so then the question is, well, do we want to not have you drop it down that far to account for this variability or this uncertainty? Or if you say, okay, yeah, we'll say that the seasonal high groundwater is higher, then now back to the thing we were just talking about, which is, okay, now the areas in which I'm going to be excavating contaminated soil are larger. There's potentially larger volumes of contaminated soil that I would have to deal with. And so in both cases, to me, that raises the relevant question of, do we not want to grant that level going down that far, just to minimize the amount of contaminated soil that's actually encountered during construction?
Well, I can offer that in some scenarios, the elevation of the site may not matter as much because we have to still avoid pipe conflicts, which sends pipes deeper than they would have to be even if the site was raised higher. So, for example, the site of all the drainage lines and the trunk lines that goes around the right-hand side out to the wetland system to the top left, we have to dodge and get under or be over the drainage line that is in the existing easement that comes across the site. So that's not a typical profile of a drain line. It's a modified profile of the drain line that goes deeper because we have to avoid conflicts in the site. So a lot of those site features, even if we raise the site back up 2 feet, is still going to be the same as they were in the original proposal.
But they're potentially not as widespread, so you're potentially localizing the amount that you're having to deal with.
Sure, potentially, but there's also the foundation is going to be a significant portion of impacts, and we still have to get down to structural soil, which is going to be at the same elevation regardless of where we put the finished floor.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think to some degree this is going to hinge on what your plan shows, what the elevations are, and what the areas are.
Sure, and I would offer up that we treat that estimated seasonal high groundwater in the same manner we would treat it for stormwater infiltration, in that you're going to use the highest value that's in the area so that we can be as conservative as possible in knowing where the estimated seasonal high would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would tend to add a foot, but yeah, I'd be interested to see that. See what you come up with.
Certain elevation as well, right?
Yeah, depending on soil type.
Yeah.
The other question is that I think that there may not necessarily be agreement on the conceptual site model, and in particular, and I'm only raising this not because I'm interested in whether you're a source or not, but I'm interested in whether we consider the septic leach fields and the location of the septic system to be areas where we want to assume that's contaminated soil, which is a different model than the one that you're using, which is the Vado zone. And so I guess that would be one question I would have for Rob is, how do you think that the contaminated soil should be addressed in the areas of the leach field and the former septic system, if it's still there, in terms of how you treat where you think the contaminated soil is and how it should be treated?
Yes, that's a good question, and so certainly, yes, in the area of the leach field, there was we saw shallower soil impacts, and so I would agree you'd have to raise sort of where you're starting, so your contaminated excavation there, and I would certainly try to use sort of the elevation of the leaching gallery that was previously installed. I think from that point down would be maybe give yourself a little buffer. Certainly getting some input from Ed. Again, but that's only if there's construction in that area, given their current status. With Mass DEP, they're only required to manage materials that they encounter.
Right. So I guess
actually go after it.
Okay, so that's a good point. So I guess I should have prefaced with the question is, are you expecting that you're going to encounter? Are you going to be going to the depths at which you would potentially encounter contaminated soil in the areas of the leach fields and the former septic system?
I think part of the building does impinge on one of the leach structures, and to the extent that we have to excavate one of those leach structures, then we would treat that as entirely as contaminated soil.
Okay. Okay. So, and then I would want to see that also designated on the plan, because what I really want is that the person who's actually doing it is understanding and aware of what it is that they're supposed to be doing, with respect to that. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
I had a question on the third-party oversight. Was there any discussion on who that third party might be?
Not as part of this process.
Okay.
I think, Joel, didn't we do that with a 40B Mill Road? During construction, was it Judith Nitch?
That was a long time ago.
We'd have to look back, maybe work with DPW.
Would it make sense to have Beta be that third party?
Yeah, absolutely.
Since
I just don't have a good feel for like what's the scope. If it's just this isn't traditional construction oversight related to steep slopes or retaining walls or something. So we can start with Beta. Probably a good place to start. But I think we need to collectively work on, what's the specialized oversight that is needed.
Right.
Okay.
So draft a scope.
Right. Right.
I'm a little confused. It says in the final sentence of your report that it's of your opinion that the data continues to suggest a potential on-site source. Is that a difference in opinion between the two of you? Still, at this point?
I'd say yes. There's certainly there's a difference in opinion, between us there, and again, really the regulatory authority that decides that is Mass DEP, and they've been apprised of the situation. They've had some questions and interaction with the applicant's LSP, so that's really and really the big difference there. If you have DPS, you don't have to assess and remediate the entire site. You just have to manage what you encounter, and so they're doing that at this point. If something changes in the future, they could have a different status. But again, at this point, that is their current legal status with Mass DEP.
So just yesterday, the EPA dropped their requirement from 20 to 4 parts per trillion. Does that affect this project at all, in your opinion?
No, because everywhere across the site, the groundwater is over 20. So
you're already in that zone.
So we're already
so
in
it's the
that.
whole site, not just well 3 or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. So now they're
the entire site, every monitoring well on the site has greater than 20 in it, no matter where it is on the site. And then just to address the differences of opinion between myself and Rob. you know, what we do here, we all have our opinions, and they're based on, you know, our understanding of the science and the regulations. It's based on my understanding of how Mass DEP treats septic systems. It's my opinion that this septic system doesn't actually qualify as a source under the regulations. Rob, I know you have a different opinion. But
Data suggests it.
the data suggests that there is contamination there, yes, but you know, DEP has carve-outs for some things because they recognize that not every scenario is perfect. And it's my opinion that the septic system at this facility meets one of those carve-outs.
I mean, how it affects us is basically, we're not assuming that there are other locations on the site that we haven't yet tested that could be contaminated. We're assuming there aren't those locations. The only thing that we're assuming is that we're going with your conceptual site model, that it's the groundwater from wherever it originated that is not of as much concern to us as much as the fact that it's contaminated. And that secondly, the septic area we would consider, which doesn't fit your conceptual site model, is contaminated soil, but we don't expect it to be outside of that, which means that we're not motivated to do any additional testing or anything like that. So I think that for the purposes of what we're trying to do, that's sufficient in my mind. And there just isn't enough evidence for us to be able to go and say that we think there are other locations that we also need to test or to mitigate or whatever. So is that a fair summary of where we're at?
I would agree with that, yes. I think, you know, one other thought or comment here that I will offer is that, you know, we intend to keep, as I mentioned previously, the board's up to speed with our communications with DEP. And, you know, DEP might ultimately agree with Rob's opinion that the septic system is a source, you know, in which case we'll have to remove it. And if DEP issues a determination like that at some point in the future, we'll comply with that.
And it's not something that your current proposal would prohibit, because the areas that potentially are contaminated, they're related to the building, you're essentially going to remove anyway.
That's right.
So it'd just be a matter of digging up the parking lot or what have you. Okay.
In the future, correct.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask was, would it be a reasonable request to ask that when you do the map that shows the elevations and the potential volumes of soil, can you do that for the plan as your proposed plan, and then can you also do it with one additional foot, with the site being 1 foot higher or the site being 2 feet higher? Is that something that is reasonable to ask for? It's just to answer the question as to whether, there's any value in raising the site. Because Casey's argument is, so, well, you aren't going to get much value out of it. Potentially, if we're not talking about any appreciable increase in volumes of contaminated soil, then I don't necessarily see the value either. My concern is that we don't create large amounts of contaminated soil that have to be dealt with. I just want to minimize the amount that we actually deal with. That's really what my objective would be. So.
I'll say it here, I can go up there if you want me to, but from a design perspective, I think it's fine to create the exhibits.
Can you,
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
can.
sorry. Good evening, Michael Bennett with DH Property Holdings. Good to see you all again. So what I was saying to Casey is I'm okay with that exhibit or two being created for Joel and the board. I think we will see what it determines. I think Casey's point is well taken from the study we've done so far, that the depth of the footing and the depth of the pipes to make all the inverts work probably isn't going to make any difference, because that's really where the excavation is. But happy to have him do that.
All right, thank you.
And then since I'm up here, there were a couple other things in a letter that I think got circulated to everybody. It was directed to Evan and David Kuntz maybe a month ago.
One was our commitment to the third party. Obviously, as we heard earlier, scope of what that means to be determined, but we're willing to do that. We also committed to the continuing conversation with the DEP. Anything they bring to us, we immediately bring to you. And I'm trying to remember the third thing. It's eluding me at the time.
It's up here on the screen.
Yeah.
I think you covered them.
I think we did cover them.
Yeah.
I believe there was one other one, but if it comes to me, I'll come back up. So,
Thank you very
thank you.
much. Okay. Anyone else have any additional questions for any of the relevant parties?
Well, I do have some site plan questions. Do you want to take those now?
Sure.
Okay. Now that I've had a fresh look at the new site plans, I did have some questions about the snow storage.
Sure.
Evan, if you could go to the one on the other side of the building. Yep. So I noticed that there's snow storage on the top perimeter, to the left. Yep, right there. Given where that location is, it might be a good idea to move that snow storage out of that back wetland area and move it more into the inner islands in that area.
Did you happen to check the landscape plan to see if there was any
Are you
major
talking
conflicts?
about this one up here?
Yep, that one.
We can move it, but it does meet wetland regulations in that location. And that's also not going to go directly downstream to the wetland. That's just simply within the buffer zone. So even if it melted, that area of grass is directed down to the pavement, which would then drain out into the stormwater system to be treated afterward.
Okay.
Just on snow storage, I wonder if if the board wants to consider what you did with 93 Brick Hill and allocate parking spaces for snow storage.
I think in most of at least on this site, there's a lot more inside areas to put the snow storage than there was on Brick Hill. So I would be more comfortable as long as it's inside the perimeter of the parking lot.
Back 5
Yeah,
spaces.
I mean, whatever, if you guys would like us to add some parking spaces, we can determine which ones would be least likely to be used, which I believe, based on our original understanding of how the property is going to work, we're not going to use most of them off on the right side anyway. But we believe that we have sufficient area within our landscaped areas or green spaces to utilize them.
Maybe those 5 spaces by themselves? Yep, right there.
So, yeah. So if that's something that's sufficient for the board, we can certainly make that revision.
That's fine with me.
Perfect.
And then extending the no snow storage signs all the way around
the
the
perimeter.
back perimeter.
Yeah.
I also noticed that the curbing along the perimeter is the Cape Cod berm, I believe.
It's a concrete curb.
Oh, is it? Okay. I misread
Sorry, I
it.
was gonna say, I know I've done a lot of changes to the site plan, but I was pretty sure it was concrete.
All right, thanks. And then the last one, I have to go back, thinking back to some of our earlier discussions about the plantings along the right side of the building. I thought, and I could be wrong, but I thought we had asked for those trees to go all the way further back, to hide more of the,
Something like that.
yeah, more of the loading docks.
I think what we had done was we had used a berm that was gonna start here because there is existing vegetation along this edge here where we're not proposing grading along this side, because this is kind of where we meet that butter. So what we had done is we created a berm here that would then have also scattered landscaping. So from that view shed, you see this array of landscaping, but then beyond that, you then get into these landscaping
Okay,
features.
that's right, I do remember.
It actually shows some
In
fairly good
addition-
stuff in trees
right, in
there already.
addition to the existing landscape that's kind of available inside.
Okay.
Those trees are already there.
Yeah, those were, discussions were so long ago, I'd have a hard
I
time.
have to re-jog my memory too.
Yeah, that parking lot's pretty trouble.
That's all I had for that.
So just to recap, the one thing that we are changing as part of that is going to be the no snow storage along the perimeter, expanding those signs to come around that top side, and then just adding snow storage within those 5 spaces on the top side. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll stay up here in case anybody else has site plan comments as well.
Anyone else? Okay.
I think the way the commission left it was they requested written responses. Those would be peer reviewed. And then that would bring us to May 8th, I think, would be your next meeting.
What do we have on May 8th?
There's a couple new hearings, nothing major like we're dealing with, but there's a couple new hearings.
Brick Hill, Hildreth.
Yeah, we
Correct.
moved a bunch
And
of
a couple
stuff.
continuations. So
Ain't gonna be
if
easy.
you think it's worthwhile to begin working on a draft decision, I can do that. It sounds like what we discussed this evening is the construction inspection details need to be worked out. Maybe best to request maybe an initial draft from the applicant, just so something gets generated for review. And maybe I'll engage with Beta, see if that's something that they're interested in, capable of doing. Try to take that as far as I can between now and May 8th.
I think that sounds like a good course. Was there anyone from the public that wanted to speak on this? Okay. Take a motion.
I move that we continue the 270 Billerica Road public hearing until May 8th.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob and Stephen.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm sorry?
Oh, do you want me to do all of this? Just an abbreviated
Bye-bye. I'm up next. Bye-bye. Yep, have a good one.
Okay, 191 Chelmsford Street, Z&K Holdings LP, proposing the construction of a new motor vehicle washing facility with associated site improvements.
All right, good evening to the board. Casey Ferrer with Howard Stein Hudson. So we left off this last meeting with the understanding that I would be providing further information to the Conservation Commission regarding operations and maintenance, specifically to address the concerns and comments of one commissioner. We did have a meeting with that commissioner last Monday. It was a significant meeting for a few hours. We discussed a variety of topics and came to some good agreements on what should be within that operations and maintenance plan and the long-term pollution prevention plan, and then also what is kind of outside the scope of what a civil engineer should be dictating as part of their plans and processes. So that being said, we did issue or submit a new long-term pollution prevention plan and operation and maintenance plan for review, which addressed more specifics to the site. It basically gave specific timelines on some maintenance items and inspection items. It boiled down specifics to how the operation and maintenance will be included within the employee handbook and how the employee handbook will be annually taught to all employees or upon them being hired. In addition, we did provide the BMP plan that was previously discussed this evening. That was something that was missing from that O&M. We did provide that as well. So that is currently under review from the Conservation Commission. We were at Conservation last night. They did continue the meeting just based on a will to have more time to review that operation and maintenance plan. I did reach out to David this afternoon to offer a little bit more input based on what conspired last night, which was some questions about how dumpster or how any spills might get relayed to the dumpster, which would then spill out of the dumpster. So we've committed that no liquid waste as it relates to spills would go into any dumpsters to try and provide further protection. So that'll go into an additional submission of a long-term pollution prevention plan. I also offered if there were any further concerns from that commissioner that they can reach out and we can try and address them prior to the next conservation meeting. We also did provide the Conservation Commission with a draft outline of what the employee handbook might look like, sections that would be included, a title so that the order of conditions can reference that employee handbook as the commission was requesting. So besides that, that's basically an update on where we're at with conservation, and I'm happy to answer any questions here on how that stands. Or if there's any other outstanding comments from the site civil that you might have.
Should we take it around? Mike?
Nothing here.
I don't have any questions at this time.
No questions, but I do have some conditions that I wanted to add into the decision.
Draft.
Also, I did want to point out something that came up in the conservation meeting last night about this site that I hadn't realized yet. The Board of Health and Chelmsford Water District process has not started on this site yet, which means so the Chelmsford Water District only reviewed this in terms of the water usage and not in terms of potential contamination and stormwater and water protection. So it struck me as something we may want to take a look at in our procedures in terms of the ordering of this. And it's something that came up in the conservation meeting last night as well, that seems to be completely backwards, seeing as how we rely on both of those groups for input into our process. So something we may want to keep in mind for future projects, but I'm not sure how we can address that on this one.
I'll just give a quick update on that. Board of Health is working with DPW, which will be working with Planning, Conservation, Water District, to hire a hydrogeologist to work with the town stakeholders to do a regulatory review, gap analysis that will provide the information to have these conversations about proper sequencing, where we need to either enhance regulation, and in some cases for the Board of Health, it may be reducing the broad scope of regulation. But that process will provide the boards and the other stakeholders a good baseline for having an intelligent conversation.
Okay.
So that I believe is scheduled to go to the Select Board for ARPA funding at their next meeting, and then the timeline will roll out from there. But absolutely in agreement with you. I think all boards are struggling with the same thing, and it probably makes sense to have some iteration of the Board of Health process, particularly site characterization, be the first step.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, to some degree, doesn't that depend on the applicant? I mean, the applicant chooses when he decides to go to whomever.
Now they do.
So, well, okay.
But we may collectively agree that
Start that process.
one particular step makes the most sense. I just don't know what that may be yet.
And then this hydrogeologist would be, like, working on as a contractor doing this review?
Would it be as needed after?
So the study that I just mentioned is a one-time. Board of Health is also in the process of hiring their own peer review consultant for their particular process.
Okay. All right. So in that case, I don't have any questions.
We can add that as a condition.
Yeah, definitely do
That they
wanna
don't,
add that.
I mean, essentially, it's in the Board of Health letter. And no different than 270 with DEP, this project they're proceeding at their own risk. I mean, they're choosing how to sequence. And if they find something at the Board of Health process, they may end up having to come back.
Mhm.
I have no problem with that. How would that work? How would it work that they would come back? I mean, because in the case of 270, we basically had to reopen.
And
right?
start a commission, basically.
I think the lesson learned here is that where it's in a Zone 2, if the Board of Health process identifies contamination, the special condition could be that in and of itself requires you to come back.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's how 270 played out.
Yeah.
I can offer additionally, just for this project specifically. It came up at Conservation Commission last night. I'm not sure that I provided it to this board, but we did do a phase 1 analysis on the site, which determined that there was no found risks. I forget the exact wording that LSPs used, but there was no found concerns that would require furthering the investigation to a phase 2. So for this site specifically, we're not concerned about subsurface contamination. We've done that investigation.
So I, for one, would like to request that that be a condition.
It's recognized environmental concern, Rick.
That's the one.
Anyone else?
Should we open up the public, or?
I see we have members of the public here who've been waiting patiently through all of our.
Laurie Myers, 7 Pine Hill Ave. I don't know that I have a ton to offer. Good news for you guys, that I haven't already. We've discussed traffic studies, all of that. I did notice in the draft that there were no hours of operation.
That special condition number 3 has blanks to be filled in.
Yep.
Yep.
So what will those be?
I think what the applicant proposed, what?
7 to 7 during the winter, and I believe it's 7 to 8 during the summer. But I'll throw those in.
I did have a question. Is that 7 days a week? Okay.
Is that
Okay,
something
and
you
that-
want to pencil in, or does the board want to continue talking about that?
Are we going over conditions now, or?
I thought we were just hearing from.
You're
Yeah.
correct.
Give her, then we'll make that change.
And then, we're recognizing sort of the process is a little backwards, but we're still allowing this to go forward, recognizing that it's backwards. All the concerns I've had with potential pollution for that area, a lot of it is on the Conservation Commission. They still haven't come back yet. I think the responsible thing to do is postpone this until we hear from them, or continue to move the process backwards the way we've been doing it, and recognize that that's a problem. So I think given the area that, we need to look at all aspects of this project, including chemical storage, handbooks, how folks are going to be trained. That's a concerning area. We just heard from the folks from the prior projects who are dealing with some pretty significant issues, and maybe 70 years ago, if folks took their time and did their due diligence, we wouldn't be in the position we are. So I'm just going to ask that we be responsible with this project, given the area it's in, and the potential impact. Thanks.
Thank you.
I don't know that there was an actual question that I would be responding to, but I do just want to reiterate that any chemicals that are within the facility are planned to be kept within the facility and then go out to the sewer and not into the stormwater, which would not interact with the aquifer. So as far as chemicals getting into the aquifer and into drinking water, just simply not the intention and not the case. That's all.
Let's face it, we have cars coming into that property the way they're turning toward the back of where the aquifer is, where the wetlands are, they're going to be sitting there. We're talking about oil, we're talking about antifreeze being closer to the wetlands. You know, how we're disposing of this and how we're handling this stuff matters. And, you know, I understand that he thinks that they're not going to be, you know, everything's going to be contained in the property. They're bringing bottles out to throw into the dumpster. They're having stuff delivered. You know, things happen. So.
Okay, how would we like to proceed?
One more.
More.
No, it's way down low.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Of course.
Bob Myers, 7 Pine Hill Avenue. I heard at the last meeting that the storm water drainage and the sewer systems are not completely independent. There's leakage and infiltration between the two. Is that still correct this week?
That pertains to older existing systems around town. I wouldn't say that would pertain to a newly built system.
And that's stormwater going into the sewer system, not the other way around.
Right.
So,
Infiltration.
yeah, because it's my understanding,
DPWs.
1980s, I believe, was the date of construction for Chelmsford sewer when it began,
Yeah.
Yeah.
approximately in the 1980s.
79 it was a thing.
Yep.
We started around early 80s.
Okay. So there won't be any cross-contamination between sewer storm drains and normal, what we call normal sewage, I guess? Because it's a brand-new system and there shouldn't be any?
Well, the pieces pertaining to this property are brand new. Obviously, the rest of the system is old.
So what is the lifespan of a pipe then before it starts leaking or getting cross-contaminated?
I don't know.
I guess,
What I will say is I know that the townwide problem is more a problem of manhole, of leakage and cross-contamination through the manholes, not from the pipes themselves.
And that's stormwater leaking into the
Stormwater
sewer,
leaking
not
into the
sewer
sewer, not
leaking
the other
into
way
the
around.
stormwater.
okay,
No,
thank you.
which of course gives us trouble in the sewer department, but that's
course,
another
yeah.
set of headaches.
That becomes the overflow.
Yeah, it becomes the
To keep up the demand.
Okay, yeah. I
That's
think
what
that
they're
answers
working
my
on.
concern because I was concerned about possible things that we think we're sending down the sewer, working their way into the
I
aquifer.
don't think so.
You know.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not here to talk. I'm just here to be ready.
Hear you.
I'm not here to talk. I'm just here to be ready to receive any questions.
So another question that came up was the noise from the vacuums. Did you find anything out with the, if there was an additional housing you could put over it to quiet it down, or if you're willing to do that if there's noise complaints?
Sure. So that was spoken about.
That's been the biggest issue I hear from people. is the
Sure.
noise.
So what we did do was we provided that, I want to call it an operations note, but I don't think that's what we labeled it. But it had basically the noise attenuation calculation to the property line that showed that if we do the condensers closer to the building and then put in that insulated housing around it, we will meet all the noise requirements at the property line.
Would you be willing to put a stipulation in there that you would readdress it if there were complaints?
I believe that was the original intention.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
there
also
was,
agreed we would test it.
yeah, we
Okay.
had a
I just
note.
didn't want that to get lost.
Sure.
in
No,
the
yeah, I
shuffle.
believe, and I'd be just
Yeah.
thinking back in my memory, but I believe that was the agreement, was that we'd test it in the future, and then if there was an issue, there is, I believe, additional insulation that we could add or other measures that we could
And the
take.
outdoor lighting was another issue.
Yeah.
The outdoor lighting?
Yeah, not 24/7.
Oh,
lighting.
correct. So,
Can you give an answer on that? Or?
Whenever I believe there's going to be cameras at the facility for security purposes, so I believe whenever the facility is not functioning or not open, the lights should be off.
So yeah, the one note I have from one of our prior meetings was that noise readings of the vacuums would be taken as part of the soft opening and submitted to the board.
And they're willing to address it with
Sure.
other
But we should
measures. That's
have
all
that
I-
as a condition.
Okay.
And maybe, I don't know how long we have them do those readings for, a period of 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, I will offer that I don't believe car washes are super busy at their most time, or at their opening time. So I would offer that we find the peak, which is usually on a Saturday, and then maybe do readings for a period. I don't know what the period would be, but I wouldn't think it would be a couple weeks until we hit that peak. I would say or if all the vacuums are being used, perhaps that couple weeks is fine. But I would say we could talk with the applicant and offer it back to Evan when he believes he should be up to speed on like his actual
do it
busy
over,
days.
just like
6
when they
months
flush
or
all the
summer.
toilets at Foxborough. You know, you go over there, run everything, take your readings, and be done.
Sure.
Doesn't
Oh,
even
yeah.
have to be open.
Sure,
You know
you're
what I
right. Yeah, we could do it that way as well.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
might be an
just
easier
run
way.
them. Yeah, we could just go there, run them, and make sure it works.
This is a sound monitoring reading prior to opening for all vacuums running at the same time?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, the sound is a concern because I'm not saying they have the exact same equipment, but one of the things that gave me pause is when you stand over near where the 110 grill is, that's a different business, I understand, but you definitely hear the noise when those start up.
We'll hear it.
You can hear noise, we
Yeah,
regulate
whether or
it at the
not
property,
it's
at the property line.
annoyance.
All right, so the applicant's gonna be responsible for hiring somebody who can do the sound testing. Okay.
And we did say that we would limit in the conditions the vacuums and lights to hours of operation.
Yes, which we haven't discussed
Should be in
yet.
here. I thought I read that.
Special condition number 3 talks about both the car wash and the vacuums.
Okay.
Casey, did you agree that it was 7 AM to 7 PM in the winter and 7 AM to 8 PM in the summer?
9.
If you give me 5 minutes, I can confirm that. Not even 5 minutes. Just continue the discussion. I'll get
I
back to
read
you.
9 somewhere.
No.
I don't believe it was 9 o'clock. I'm 99% sure it's 7 to 7 and then 7 to 8, but I'll verify if you guys want to
That
keep
sounds
7
discussing.
to 7 winter.
7 to 7 in the winter, shorter hours in the winter, and then longer hours in the summer.
I think I said 9.
No, I thought
Do we have
I
to
have
agree to
9
that?
in my notes, so I read it somewhere.
Why can't we just leave it the same hours all year long?
It's lighter later in the summer.
I know, but give the neighbors something.
Yeah, but.
Well, it's not gonna be 9.
Not
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be 8, 8 would be the,
Yeah, but I think in the winter time,
Wait, did you have
7,
something
people
else you
are
wanted to say?
indoors, you come home.
you're all kind
I think, I mean,
of dark.
yeah,
It feels like it's 8.
I think 7 to
A
7.
lot of car washes are closed after 6.
Okay,
You go around right now, they're all closed.
all right, I'm okay with that.
And the vacuums are off too. So to have them go past that time, I mean, I agree in the summer.
Is there a
but-
standard?
I mean, you go to 110, they're all closed.
Once traffic
The
on the
only
main
one,
road
the only one
dies
that's open, the
down.
110 one,
you
that's
shut it
24
down.
hours. We're down by where you just mentioned the grill.
What about 7 to 7, be done with it all year?
Okay.
Yeah.
Or 7 to 6 in the wintertime.
And then 7 to 6 in the winter. Sure.
I mean, people are at home having dinner, like, I don't.
Sometime
know,
people
like-
might be out
like-
at
like-
night cleaning their cars.
So to confirm, the condition is going to reduce the intended hours of operation
Yes.
by an hour of each
7 to 6,
the winter.
winter.
7 to 7 summer.
7 to 7 summer.
Why 6 in the winter?
Because it's dark.
Because people want to be eating dinner, you don't want to be hearing that thing go, because you're indoors eating dinner, and
A
some
lot of
people
people
are
leave
out.
town in the summer.
Yeah, like,
People's windows are closed in the winter. What is it for the other car washes in town?
We do.
Do we do?
We may
We
not
do
even,
have
we may
noise
not even
regulation
regulate them.
in town.
Was anybody on the board when we did the last one?
And it's
If
there
the,
for protection, and.
Which one was the last one? It's been at least,
per
it's been
month.
more than 16 years.
Oh, it's been that long.
So I don't even know if the
in the
board had.
wintertime, it gets dark at 4 o'clock, who's going to go through and back up your car in the dark?
My has
Well,
one.
I'd like to ask if the facility is going to meet the noise regulations.
Yeah.
What's the basis for reducing the hours? You know, if the applicant doesn't get business at those hours, that's on his dime.
Kind of the lighting for me too, that was the other thing. Wasn't necessarily all noise, it was lighting and noise.
In the summer, it's not dark sometimes until 9 o'clock, so the lighting isn't going to be too
Yes.
abrasive at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say 8 o'clock in the summer would be too detrimental.
Yeah, it strikes
You
me
make
that was
points
a
there.
reasonable set.
I was fine with 7 to 7 and then 7 to 8.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was okay
Nail
with that
it.
too.
I think 8 o'clock's late. So what are you gonna do? So you guys decide what you wanna do. I mean, it's
Well,
a
if it doesn't,
majority
if
anyways,
it
but
doesn't work,
the business,
they're not gonna
if he
be
could,
open.
they would go 24 hours to make their money. So I think we gotta be reasonable with the neighbors.
And there are
and what's
24,
going
but
on.
you can go somewhere at 24/7
But we're not gonna have
somewhere,
that.
and-
We're not gonna
No,
have
but
that.
people could, not at this.
You could go someplace else, right?
Right, there's 2 other locations.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess before we go any further, we need to figure out this hours issue. Just who would like, can I have a motion?
I would move 7 to 7 and 7 to 8.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? What's that, 4?
4 to 3.
Okay. Chris was a swing vote.
Since
Just so
we're,
you know where to put your.
since we're noodling on conditions, condition number 2 needs board attention, special condition number 2.
I also have other conditions too.
This condition relates to the dollar contribution for
For the parking?
new parking spaces
300
created.
bucks.
So the applicant is, I guess, interpreting, for lack of a better word, that there are 3 new parking spaces. And we don't
Let's just count them all.
we don't define, we don't distinguish every unique situation where there's a space next to a vacuum. The current policy doesn't get to that level of detail.
Say we count them all. Can we count them all?
Yeah.
What's the basis for the 3 new?
Well, the applicant is providing 3 technical parking spaces by standard size for employees only, whereas the vacuum spaces are strictly for parking and for vacuums. So
But they're still
that's
parking
his
spaces.
position.
How do we,
Yeah, I think generally speaking, over the years,
Well, we're
the
gonna stick
board
with all
has
of
taken
these.
So
the board has
his-
taken a broad approach to interpreting.
His question on this was strictly just to gauge the board's definition of what the parking space may be. He was under the interpretation that his parking spaces would be the 3 that he's been requested to add throughout this process for the employees, but it was open to what the board may think.
I think parking when you're vacuuming is the same as parking.
Yeah, parking's parking.
Good enough for me.
It's,
Okay.
it's the impervious surface.
Right. That's really the,
What is the total number of spaces?
17.
There goes your bonus.
So what's the inclination of the board?
17.
17.
Yeah, yep. Okay, and Chris, you had some.
Yeah,
additional-
and before I add that, I don't remember what the discussion was, but multicolored LED lights, were those in use inside and or out?
No, the flashing ones that you'll see down the street at the mobile station.
Yeah.
That's not the intention.
Okay.
No.
Are there steady multicolored lights?
I believe interior of the facility, the systems themselves have lights, but they're not flashing and they're not changing colors like multicolor.
Okay.
Green, red.
Okay.
Will that be stipulated in the conditions?
What was that?
Yeah, we should probably stipulate that it's,
Oh, it's their design, it's an enclosed
I-
system.
it's
They
fine,
have their
no-
controls.
No flashing exterior lights.
yeah.
Inside the.
Or
inside the
interior lights
facility,
that are
it's a
visible from the
design.
outside, because that's the other thing with the other car washes, that it's a big glass wall, so even the interior lights
You see.
strobe effect to the outside.
Yeah, but this this is not gonna be working at night.
Yeah, it's not gonna be a problem.
In the wintertime, it will be till 7 at night.
No, till
Gets dark
Oh,
at
so that's
4:30.
So at night, it would be 4 to 7,
Yeah.
Yeah.
dark.
I mean, this kind of car wash definitely has different colored lights inside the tunnel,
Yeah.
right?
Kids like to go
There,
through and
there
see
are,
different
but I don't
lights.
believe they're flashing and as in your face is what you're gonna see down the street. At least that's the
Yeah, they're not-
description that I
they're
get
not.
from the applicant.
That's right.
When you like do an add-on for a tire
Yeah, that's
polish,
fine.
It will flash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right, but
talking-
it's not like to draw people in and
Right,
say this is a
Yeah.
car wash, come.
I'm
yeah, right.
talking like the ones at the mobile
In the
station.
windows where it's open. I
Yeah.
get- Okay, this is, right, okay.
The other thing that I'd like to see added is that if there are any concerns or issues raised in the Board of Health Chelmsford Water District process that may impact the aquifer protection or stormwater, that it comes back before the board for review.
So not just contamination?
You don't
The
never
way,
know
the
what
way I
that-
jotted down initially was Board of Health process where it finds contamination, planning board modification is required.
Contamination or concerns where plan modification is
Like
required.
maintenance or any of that, like different type of maintenance or product like we just went through.
Yeah.
It would have to go in front of us at that point, so if he's changing.
I don't know, Board of Health process would ever get that far.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any concerns or findings?
Right, I was gonna.
Like if you had to use a jellyfish or something.
Correct, yeah, so any stormwater change like that, we're happy to say if there's a stormwater change that comes out of the Board of Health process, any kind of aquifer protection change, then yeah, we'll come
Okay.
back.
And then the last condition I wanted to add was that the, kind of in line with what the Conservation Commission is doing with the long-term pollution protection plan and O and M into the employee handbook appendix with training for the employees.
Okay.
I know, as a general philosophical matter, and not necessarily pertaining to this particular thing, I don't think we should be
Dictating.
laying out that level of detail for a functioning business. I think we should base our decision on the result, not on the method in most cases. I realize, obviously, you need an O and M plan in many situations.
But if no one looks at the O and M plan or
And
no
no,
one
and then
sees
if
it,
nobody looks at the O and M plan.
that's a
and-
problem.
And something goes wrong, then
And I wouldn't,
we
I
point.
wouldn't
just-
request this in most.
I don't like dictating that level of process.
And in most places, I wouldn't want
Yeah.
to, but in these sensitive areas like we're seeing,
This is a car wash, not a.
in a sensitive area.
Petroleum distilling plant.
It's in a sensitive area with chemicals.
And they're seeking a special permit in Aquifer Protection
Yeah.
District.
Yeah, well, that's half the town.
Okay, well then, you know,
You
as.
think so? I just think we
But
should,
it's a-
we should
it's a-
tread very carefully.
Yeah. I wouldn't request it for a coffee shop, but for a car wash that
Well,
deals in
coffee shop's
chemicals.
unlikely to be in here on a special permit, so.
Okay.
So the only other condition that we may want to consider adding is light fixtures not to exceed, is it 4K?
4,000,
4K.
4,000
4,000. what?
Kelvin.
Kelvin, was it?
4,000 K.
Standard though, right?
Yeah, it's standard in your decisions. The 4K is not a bright white light, but a little tone of blue.
It's a little
or
softer,
something.
yeah. It's not blue, that's for sure.
So the way the decision is set up, the facts and findings, and then anywhere under findings, it contemplates the board itemizing applicable facts to support those those findings.
And then I had one other question. If the Conservation Commission finds that they need to adjust the O&M plan or any of that, we don't have to put that in our conditions, right? They would automatically update
Yeah.
to meet their standards, and then it would carry.
Yeah, we can capture that as part of special condition, number 1, prior to planning board endorsement of final plans, all plan revisions and O&M.
And for that revision, if you could just highlight what, if any, changes between now and then?
Yeah, what I can do is I can just add 2 copies, one that's going to be the final document, and then one that is basically a marked up version to show what's the difference.
That'd be great,
That'd be
thanks.
perfect.
So that would be your opportunity to review the O&M.
Yep.
Been a long time since we took a vote.
Yeah.
Great, I'll take a motion.
Did you want to, this evening, itemize the applicable facts?
Can I suggest that's easier done if each person just goes through it once?
You want
We
to,
sum them all up and then bring them in and just read off the
or
numbers.
you can email them, however you
Yeah.
want to do it.
I mean, I've started, but I haven't got all the way through.
So is the goal tonight, the board to vote, and that this decision is signed and recorded with the clerk within the next couple days,
No,
or?
why don't we push
No.
it out? Why don't we,
Or do you want to itemize the facts tonight, or do you want to take a vote with the condition that each member is
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
submitting their itemized facts, which then authorizes the chair to,
I'd like to see a
That's the way
revised
we've done it before, right?
Yeah.
draft of
Yeah.
the conditions and.
so the decision as drafted is fully detailed. The only item that I don't do on behalf of the board is identify applicable facts that are associated with some of the findings.
Yeah, but I don't know, I'd like to see like we submit our feedback, then I'd like to see like a final version to relook at it.
You,
Can we just,
you have that.
You,
You have that.
yeah, but if we're changing the facts, or people providing.
You're attaching.
Oh, I see what you're
facts.
saying. I see
Yeah,
what you're
like,
saying.
I'd just like to see like a final,
Okay,
like.
so may I suggest, if you're inclined to take a vote based upon seeing a finalized version with the new special conditions,
And any
and-
additional
and then-
facts.
Yeah.
individual members will email me their individual facts. That will authorize the chair to be able to sign it, so they can be clocked in.
yeah,
Otherwise, we're talking about either doing it tonight or May 8th.
Yeah.
yeah. I'd be perfectly willing to go ahead tonight, based on that.
Is everyone in accord with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have
Take
to,
a
we have to
motion.
close the hearing first.
Close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Oh, to close the hearing, yes.
All right, take another motion.
I move that we approve the special permits.
Two? Do we have to do those individual or?
Yeah, we do,
Do we?
I believe.
Well, you could say approve as presented in the draft decision.
Okay. I move that we approve as presented in the draft decision, the approval for 191 Chelmsford Street project.
I second.
With new special conditions.
Yes. With the amended special conditions as discussed tonight.
And that we get to review it beforehand.
And board members provide itemized facts and findings.
And as board members, itemize facts and findings.
I have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No,
You're opposed?
opposed.
Oh, you raised your hand with the eyes. I was confusing. Okay. So 6-1, and
I'll make a motion.
We're going to approve minutes.
we have
Please.
minutes.
I didn't see the minutes. Oh, there it is.
And liaison updates.
And liaison updates, and any new business, which I have one thing.
Thanks, Casey.
See you, Casey.
All right, shall we start with liaison updates?
Sure. Let me get my notes. So last night's Conservation Commission meeting, I think beat our record for long meetings. Went to 11:30 last night.
Yeah, I'm sorry
they-
I talked so long.
They did talk about most of the projects, in addition to 10 Hildreth and Brick Kiln. For Brick Kiln, they're keeping it open until next meeting when the conditions will be drafted, so they're expecting to close next meeting. And then Hildreth had some discussion about natural heritage and vernal pools. So that will continue to go on, probably after our meeting. The other thing that came up last night was Conservation Commission's going to have a work session on May 7th, when they're going to talk about their internal processes, collaboration, talking about O&M plans and things like that, getting their policies and procedures starting to be in order, similar to what we started to do. So I'll be participating in that as well to help them out with any lessons learned from our work and to see if there are any overlaps that we can help with, bring back here as well. So that's it.
Anyone else?
So I just got a question on the Conservation Commission. So is it our intent as a group to wait for them to close their hearings before we make a decision on our
Should we just
decisions, or
postpone them
wait?
from our hearing? Because they're gonna be in front of us before they make their decision.
So in terms of which project? Any project or?
No, the two that you just mentioned. So
Yeah.
the question is, are we gonna wait till, are we gonna wait as a group to close ours until they close theirs? Because I think 93 Brick Kiln Road is pretty close, so I think, do we postpone that one out, or do you want to continue to have it, and we're just continuing to?
So in my
Yeah, just
opinion,
bring
it
them in.
depends on the project and it depends on what the issues are.
Okay.
And I think that if it looks like there are going to be no significant issues,
Are we gonna bring up any issues with either one of these projects, is what I'm thinking? Because are we done bringing up our issues, do you think? Or is it just,
I think the more important question is, to what degree do the issues of the multiple boards overlap? Because if they don't overlap, we should just press on forward
I
and
think-
not.
Yeah.
I think
just
we're getting
asking
into
about
a
the
situation
sequence.
where there's so many moving
Yeah.
parts. It's a three-body problem.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, you don't get
we don't
a
wanna
linear
waste people's
solution to
time.
that.
That's our time
It
and
doesn't
them.
exist. They've
but
already
I think
proved
in
it.
the bigger projects that we've encountered so far, we are collaborating and coordinating in
Yeah.
ways
But I
that,
think
Actually,
that,
doing
I
pretty
think the
well.
applicant thinks they're coming in front of us to discuss the whole project where we may be all set and we're just waiting for confirmation from
Yeah.
Concom or something. You know what I mean? I don't wanna waste people's time, that's all.
Right.
I think in some projects, I'm trying not to be specific about projects because we're not discussing the projects
You haven't
tonight.
mentioned the name.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I think in
I'm
one
saying in
project,
Going
the
forward.
groups are aligned, we're looking at similar things, and I think we're at very good, similar stages.
There'll be better communication.
I think in another project, we're looking at two very different things right now. And I think there are some dependencies and some things in play, but I think we're at different stages.
There's been examples in the past where the board planning board has closed a hearing and voted a decision without the commission being complete. But to Chris's point, the commission wasn't focused on stormwater. They were focused on
Exactly. yeah.
something else.
Yeah, so it's all tied together. We should wait.
And I am keeping an eye on that, where if it looks like they're looking at something that we might need to have in our decision,
Mhm.
I will raise that as a flag that we don't vote on anything.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So the sequence is that they close first.
There is no predetermined.
No, but it seems like this board,
In
this
years,
past
in
year,
years,
it's
in
been
years
like that.
past.
We've done a lot of that, and I
In years
and I think
past,
it's
the
a
planning
problem.
board always
a problem, Mike?
would finish
Right.
their hearings first.
I think
Well,
we
that's
just
right.
need
That's
to
part of our
That's why I'm asking the
procedures that we're
question.
gonna change, right?
Are we, as a board, want to set that sequence that we want them to close first with their findings?
I
I
don't-
think it
don't think
depends
we
on
should.
what the LSP
The-
discussion or
Within
The problem with that
proximity, I
notion is that, just like the planning board has found a need to do additional peer reviews, so has the Concom.
Oh, I know.
And the Concom is more likely to do more peer reviews for a variety of issues than the planning board would, because their jurisdiction is just, so it doesn't make sense to just say to have a procedure and protocol where it's predetermined. It's really on a case-by-case
So I think we
basis.
just gotta be clear to the proponents, the applicants here, that,
What the
we are
applicants,
waiting.
what the applicants are looking for, and this all goes back to the Board of Health coordination and Concom and Planning Board coordination, they want to know what are the rules of engagement as soon as possible.
Right.
They don't want to find out 6 months into a process that a new issue arises and now it requires a peer review.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I
Some of that's always on the applicant,
Yeah.
and they know of an issue and they don't.
Well, they just try to skirt
I
it.
just think
So-
it was one.
But it's the boards, it's, the frustrating part for an applicant is where the boards
Shifting
are,
sands.
where they're not looking at the entire project collectively, and they're focused on one particular item. They want to resolve that one particular item before they move on to the next item.
Right.
The applicant wants to be able to do multiple peer reviews at the same time. And boards have a tendency to want to focus on one issue because they're very complicated in nature.
Right.
So-
I think one of the applicants, I'm sorry,
No, you're
was
good.
looking at the last meeting, or a couple meetings ago, their last meeting, for a decision from us. And then we gave them one more homework assignment, and then they're pushed off into May. And I think we're heading now down the road that we're gonna push that. So I think that applicant needs to be made aware that this board right here is not gonna close that night. And it's up,
For Hildreth? I'm not for
I'm not
Hildreth.
mentioning names, I'm just,
Well, okay.
For-
So
in the near
I mean,
future,
I
in-
feel
just
like
in the
we're
near future.
close
In the near
in a
future.
couple things that we're not, I'm unaware that I'm feeling the need to wait for conservation.
I don't know, I'm just saying, they were looking for a decision, the last one. You could tell by the attorney.
Well, we can give a decision, it still doesn't mean the project's gonna go forward.
I
If
think-
no, I
they have
agree
to
with
get
that.
another permit
One,
from
the one
somebody
you're
else.
referring to, Mike, at the last meeting, I agree with you, there was a draft decision here, but a new issue arose.
That's right.
Planning board
Gave
took
them
a
a
vote to do a
homework
peer review.
Yes.
So they're not, the board didn't give the applicant any homework. The board initiated a peer review because it felt as though there was a new issue that needed some attention.
That's right.
that's not related to the Conservation Commission.
No, I was just saying, that's what I'm trying to get an understanding of what the intent here is. Are we waiting for a sequence of Conservation
It's
Commission?
very
It
project
sounds-
specific,
But
I
it sounds like we're gonna wait for a Conservation Commission
No.
to close on that one.
No, I don't think so.
What they decided,
I think
that-
they're
Just be
meeting,
cognizant that
what they
it will go
decided
fast
last
anyway,
night,
that's all.
No, but your comment,
I'm
I know,
so
but your comment,
confused.
I don't mean to be confusing. Your comment you made was that the comments won't be made until after our next meeting.
no.
We're gonna have another meeting, and then they're not meeting till after.
Oh, no,
our next
no, that's reversed. So Conservation Commission has 2 more meetings before our next one.
Okay.
they voted last night to have a draft decision at their next meeting for a variety of
Tell me
hearings.
after.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're
But
likely,
there are people on the commission who would prefer to keep their hearing open until planning board is resolved, just like there are likely people on the planning board who would like to keep.
No, I can see
In
that.
the software
I feel
world,
that,
we
and
call
I
it a
just, like-
fatal embrace.
but it depends on the
You
project.
never get out of
No,
it.
I agree. It
Some
depends on the
projects where we're
project,
gonna
and I
need to
think we
stay in
have-
sync
We've had two
close at the same
Two major
time.
projects in front of us that have never been like this.
These are unique projects,
Very unique.
and hopefully we'll never see this uniqueness again.
And if we're going around, I mean, I think,
Be sure
you
we're
know,
covering it.
if we're considering projects that have serious wetland issues and serious things, then I want to know what conservation thinks, and I want to see that. Because when we initially get a concept or a plan, we might think it looks good, and then as we dig and do our homework, our issues arise, so.
But what we've found with the Concom is that we can actually work with them reasonably effectively, and we can come to some good answers. At least I think we've coming to good answers. Sure as hell's been interesting, I'll give it that.
Yeah, they have
Okay.
some interesting meetings.
So annual goals and objectives, we've talked about as part of the election campaign. The three of us that were running anyway, have talked about some of our goals. And, one is to kind of go through the zoning book and look at things that are clearly out of date. Kelly brought us the lighting tonight, and
Yeah.
I think that was a good idea and suggestion. I think, we should probably make a work session down the line, maybe in May sometime, where we can maybe pick off a couple areas if people would just kind of look through and prioritize. We also have our zoning conflict areas that we already identified with NEMCOG. And we also had talked about looking carefully at the overlay districts and seeing if we want to tweak them. So I think those are like three things to start. We should probably pick one of those and then.
Yeah, and
We have a meeting
I'll-
tomorrow with the center, obviously Mike.
Right.
And
Yeah.
NEMCOG's got some
and-
funding, I guess.
Yeah, I would love it if you would bring back to us kind of an
A
update.
report.
And 'cause
Yeah, yeah.
I'm actually hoping
Right
that
now,
you
it's kind of
guys
in the
and
air,
your
but we're
work-
having the meeting tomorrow, so we'll.
I know.
Everything gets kicked off tomorrow.
Right, no, I know, but I'm hoping that the way that you approach that with NEMCOG
Okay.
and the way that that group presents a plan can maybe be a template for us for the other
How much should we focus on parking right now? You know what I mean?
parking.
Like, we're gonna focus on parking in the center, but now that
We've been focusing on parking in the center for the last 30 years.
You know what I mean?
Haven't
Those
gotten
are the
an answer
things.
yet.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you guys how to do your job. You're gonna have guidance from NEMCOG.
But I'd like your input, that's all.
Yes, focus on parking.
Is it the biggest issue?
I think
No, I
I
think
think the
village too.
board somewhat resolved the parking concerns when you
Yeah, I thought that was
modified
kinda-
you
Yeah.
reduced the
that.
automatic reduction in the
Yeah.
center.
How much more can we
Right.
build in that area? That's the other question, you know what I mean?
Because there's other businesses that are coming in that do
I
not
know.
have to come in
Like
front of
Bobby
us.
wants to go second floor.
Like one that just opened up across the street that never came in, those people are parking all over the area as well.
Right?
Right.
He still wants to go
Well,
second
and they
floor
also have
eventually.
parking spaces that when they
Eventually.
came to us
Yeah,
with
that's his
that
goal.
project,
They did.
they have parking that they're not using.
Yeah.
Correct, but there's also, that parking doesn't handle the total amount of people that can get in that facility.
Yeah, it's getting
No,
pretty
but
crowded
they
over
have
there.
a whole parking area
know that.
behind them that's currently occupied by buses.
I do, I
That
know.
they own, that they were presenting as parking for their business. Am I not
What-
There's a
what-
little
I
bit of a
missed-
conflict with the,
Discussed it for 10 years.
the
I missed
way-
what we were talking about.
yeah.
parking?
Parking now. Should he focus on parking? I said.
Yeah, I
yes,
think
focus on
parking's still a hot topic.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
so
The
I'm gonna
village, too,
propose
yeah.
that we put off doing liaison assignments till after town meeting. And,
In work session, well, let's wait till we see what happens at the.
Yeah,
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 find
yeah,
out how
yeah.
much
Yeah.
trouble we're in.
Before
Okay.
we talk about, like, what our goals are, because we'll see
Yep,
what happens
sure.
after.
Could change.
that's a good point.
But I agree with what you're saying about
Baby
goals.
step.
And then, we have minutes, unless anyone has anything.
Actually, one other thing on that, one other
Second.
thing on that topic was that, I think one thing that would be nice is to find a way to be able to get more community outreach for this board, to be sort of in more intimate communication with the public rather than us sitting behind these things. And
Yeah.
the reason I say that is because when Chris and I were getting signatures, went down to Maxwell's, for the market, winter market,
Yeah.
and people come up and they say,
Oh, yeah.
hey, what about this? Hey, what about that?
Yeah.
And it was just really nice to stand around and talk about
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, I mean, I'd go
And-
down
We
to
do it all the
Maxwell's
time.
and
I
I'd be
talk about
talking for 2 hours.
Yeah. So I just, I don't know exactly how we could do that, but I think just providing opportunities for the
I think
for the
this
public
group
to
here-
access us.
I think
you
this
know, and
group
have
here is pretty
discussions.
visible. You know what I mean? We're all visible.
We
Like,
we
we're
could
in-
set something up for like the summer thing on the common, the
Coffee.
old dunk tanks with a.
We raise a lot of money that way.
We'd raise a
Oh, we
lot of
already-
money.
Well, the school board has done before coffees,
Yeah.
where they invite people to come and talk about their issues
Yeah.
with, if not the whole board, a number of people. I think that would be a good thing. I found the same thing at the market. I also would love to meet with neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Because like, I feel like this
That's better.
Maxwell's issue, you know, it would be great to get the neighborhoods' input of what do they envision would be.
Yeah,
And
because someone from North Chelmsford is not gonna think the same
Right.
as someone from the center.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's gonna be different everywhere you go.
Hence the challenges with zoning in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
Very neighborhood-centric.
Yep.
Well,
It's
I mean,
the
village
best neighborhood,
zoning,
by the way.
village zoning could help with that maybe in both places.
And they're working on that. They-
Going to the neighborhoods is a
General
great
village
idea.
zoning.
Yeah.
Lawn drive.
We doing minutes?
Move to approve.
Second,
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I thought we were gonna get it by night.